Okay, good evening, everyone. It's Thursday, January 14th, 2016, calling the meeting to order. Hingham Selectmen. There are no minutes. Take questions from the public regarding items not on the agenda. Yes, Mr. Hersey, good evening to you.
My name is John Hersey, 65 Hersey Street, and I want to wish everybody a happy tax bill. I'm going to be very short tonight. It looks like a lot, but it's not. I'm just going to show you something. I just want to show you something. This here is a oil sheen at a town building. This here is also the same issue, and it goes into a storm drain. I belong to the Back River Watershed Association, and this happened in 2011 on that issue. This here, I'd just like to ask a question on this one here. This was January 18th of 2014. Has this already been addressed? I mean, is the issue of the axle falling off a vehicle, has this been addressed at the time? Because it's winter time.
I think I've seen you with that picture before, but the answer to your question is, do I have information on that as we sit here tonight?
Yeah,
with no advance notice by you that you're going to talk about that? No, I don't.
You don't know what's been addressed as far as maintenance on the vehicles? You don't know?
Is that a question you want answered?
Yeah, I'd like to know if it's been addressed as far as...
All right. I'm going to refer that to the town administrator. He'll respond to you in the appropriate course.
Okay. Tonight or not?
No.
No, okay. Because it's happened, not the same truck, but a different truck. It happened September, the middle of September on Hersey Street, the bottom of the hill. The axle fell right off the same, not the same truck, but the same issue. So in 67 years of living in, I've never had this, I never had this occurrence in my lifetime in Hingham or the state. I've never heard of the axle coming off a vehicle. And this is all the same issue. It comes down to one person that's involved in this here.
Now, we got to be very careful that we're not going to identify any particular employee.
I didn't say anybody's name. I didn't say anybody's
position.
I said it comes down to one person. Okay? Now I come. Now this has been. This here, I'm not going to mention any names. This has been going on for a long time. Okay? And I finally got so mad. I've taken some pictures of it. It's a town vehicle that is being used for private use before work, okay? And I find it very, very disingenuous of the individual. Takes a truck home with a plow, and he does this. Everything is right here.
Would you give that to Mr. Alexiadis?
Yes,
and he will.
Thank you.
I'll look into the board and report back to you.
Yep.
Thank you.
He's coming in, yes.
He's going to. Mr. Gannon will be here, but he's running a little late, so just. Put that right up
Will
here.
somebody get in touch with you within a week, or writing, or a phone call?
I'll respond to you as soon as I've looked into it, Mr. Hersey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this point in time, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, unless anybody else wants to speak. I don't see anybody. The Community Preservation Committee Task Force. Would you join us, please?
Can we get one more chair, if we need?
One more chair?
Please.
Greetings, gentlemen, and congratulations to you, Attorney
Congratulations,
McElhaney, best lawyer in the state for 2016. Good going.
For a small fee.
Yeah, I guess
We sign my report after the meeting.
I guess Nutter has a pretty good PR department, huh?
Very well deserved.
This must be a pretty good report if you're in it, then. All right. Floor is yours.
The committee, as we understood our assignment, was to look at essentially two questions. The first was, must a member of the Board of Selectmen sit on the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee? And then the second question was, if a selectman need not occupy that fifth permanent seat, what entity should? I say fifth permanent seat because the statute, the Community Preservation Act, designates 5 entities to have seats on the CPC. And then the town can appoint up to 4 more members, so that the total membership on the committee cannot exceed 9. It appears that it may have been, I won't get into that. I'll just tell you, we met, the 5 of us, Mr. Davenport, Mr. Farrell, Ms. Reardon, and Ms. Tully, who both send their regrets. And we talked with the Community Preservation Coalition, talked to the Bureau of Municipal Finance Law of the Division of Local Services at the Department of Revenue. We spoke with the current and former chairs of the CPC and current and, not current, but former selectmen and town council. We looked at the 2 statutes involved, Chapter 45 of the General Laws, and more specifically Section 2. And we looked at Chapter 44B, which is the Community Preservation Act. And then we looked at Hingham bylaws and looked at those of some of other towns. We looked at the legislative history of these 2 statutes. We looked at the legislative history of the bylaws by reviewing warrant articles and meeting minutes when necessary, and town reports, publications on the website of the coalition, and DOR regulations, and a very helpful history of the Recreation Commission by Mark Thorell, the Recreation Director, that we received through the town clerk. Notwithstanding that, the question is somewhat, the answer to the question is somewhat complicated, I guess, to say that the assumption seems to have been that when a town, or the statute says, when a town does not have a board of park commissioners, then the Community Preservation Act says, if a town does not have one of the 5 designated entities, then the entity who most closely performs the duties of that designated entity that doesn't exist, or otherwise is authorized to act in that capacity, shall provide the member for the 5th permanent seat. In our case, the Board of Park Commissioners was the entity for which town does not have a Board of Park Commissioners. So the question is, what do you do? And there are 2 places to look. The Community Preservation Act says, as I just said, if you don't have one of the entities, look to the entity in the town that acts as or fulfills the functions that the park commissioners, our example, would have done. And the analysis, the statute it's clear that it provides a very functional approach, a pragmatic approach. It's not a legalistic analysis, but the Community Preservation Act wants somebody who's familiar with and fulfilling those kinds of functions to sit on the committee. Now, what was interesting is that in talking to a really knowledgeable attorney at the Department of Revenue, sort of brought home that the reality these days is that in the case of, say, park commissioners, a town can have many entities that perform what used to be the duties of solely of the park commissioners. And if you look at Hingham, we concluded that's exactly what our situation was, that there are several entities, including the Board of Selectmen and others, who have either been authorized or have actions subsequently ratified by the town in which they have fulfilled duties of the old park commissioners. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I'm getting the second question first. But as to the first question, the basis for the initial appointment of a Board of Selectmen member as a member of the CPC seems to have been Section 2 of Chapter 45. And the second sentence of that section says if you don't have an elected planning board or elected park commissioners, then the selectmen shall act as the park commissioners. That's fine, except for the fact that the first sentence says something different. And the first sentence says that a town may, by vote, designate that the planning board or the Department of Public Works or the road commissioners may, or the selectmen, of course, may act as the road commissioners. When Hingham abolished the Department of, the Board of Park Commissioners in 1991, it first, the town meeting took no action on a motion under a warrant article that would have sought special legislation to designate the selectmen as park commissioners. It's hard to read too much into a legislative non-action, but I pass it on for what it's worth. The next article, Article 25, is when the town meeting abolished the Board of Park Commissioners and transferred their duties and functions and personnel to the Highway Department. And then it was, I think it was short, as well as the Tree and Park Superintendent's functions. I think it was shortly after that, or I think it was in the same year, when the Highway Department probably started began to be called the Department of Public Works. Now, to go back to the statute, well, for a minute, it seems clear that in 1991, the town voted to have the DPW, or the Highway Department then, act as the park commissioners, not the selectmen. So when you go back to Section 2 of Chapter 45, the first sentence says you can designate one of these four entities to act as park commissioners, and then the second sentence says you can designate, if you don't designate one of these two, then it has to be the selectmen by default. There's obviously a great inconsistency between the two sentences, and the courts use what they call canons of statutory construction to reconcile these kinds of issues, and the principal canon is that you try to read a statute as internally consistent and as a harmonious whole. And even if the language literally says something contradictory like that, the courts say you avoid the contradiction if it's at all possible. So I think a fair reading of Chapter 45, Section 2, is that the second sentence, which says, in a town which has not elected a Board of Park Commissioners or has not authorized the town planning board to so act, the selectmen shall act as such board. I think what's missing there is, in a town which has not elected a Board of Park Commissioners or has not assigned the duties to the DPW or road commissioners, then the selectmen shall act as such Board of Park Commissioners. There's not really any case law on that. To the extent that there is, the way I just read the statute is how the SJC read the statute in the Codex case. And then, as we explained in our report, after the Codex case, the legislature immediately amended the statute to reverse, in essence, the results of the SJC's decision on a going forward basis. So, long story short is, we concluded there is nothing in the general laws that requires a member of the board, or the bylaws of Hingham, that requires a Board of Selectmen member to sit on the CPC. That got us to the second question: if not a member of the Board of Selectmen, who? And as we said, there are a number of entities, including the Board of Selectmen, the Bear Cove Park Committee, DPW, Harbor Development, Open Space Acquisition Committee, Recreation Commission, and the Ware River Estuary Park Committee, and there are probably others that I'm missing, all of whom exercise some of the duties and functions of the old park commissioners to a greater or lesser extent. Now, frankly, we did not go through all of the warrant articles from 91 to the present to find when these various entities were created and what powers were given, etc. But whether, as I said, whether the powers were expressly given to these entities, or whether the powers were implicitly given in the action taken by the entities subsequently ratified by a town meeting, I don't think really matters, because the reality is the old duties and functions have been distributed through several entities. So this is when the discussion with the Department of Revenue person became very useful, because she was not surprised to hear that several entities now exercise these powers. And so she said, you know, essentially what the town has to do is sort of make a good faith determination of which of those entities best meets the spirit of the Community Preservation Act. And again, it's more, you know, she suggested, in the spirit of the CPA, more of a functional analysis than a legalistic approach. So we said, okay, of those various entities, only the Board of Selectmen, the DPW, and the Rec Commission have town-wide responsibilities. And the DPW is not a committee. That's sort of anomalous in this situation, because all of the designated seats on the CPC come from committee entities, if you will, and then the assignment is for the committee itself to designate the person who sits. And of course, the DPW is led by a full-time town employee, which is unlike any of the other positions. And we also, you know, in looking at what the DPW does, and obviously they do a lot more than I'm aware of, but looking at some of the things they do, a lot of it has to do with maintenance of parks and fields. And the CPA explicitly says that a town cannot use community preservation funds for maintenance items. So then you take a harder look at what the Recreation Commission does, and it's clear that a lot of what they do is explicitly stated as one of the duties of the old park commissioners with regard to providing recreation opportunities on and off site of parks in the town. And then we look also at town meeting in 2013. In 2013, the town meeting voted to add the Recreation Commission as a permanent seat on the CPC. And they did that by taking away one of the 2 at-large appointments that the Selectmen had. So there were 5 designated entities under the statute, and then the town created 4 other positions, 2 to be appointed by the Selectmen, 2 to be appointed by the moderator. In 2013, town meeting said, we think the Rec Commission should be on, should have a permanent seat on the CPC. And then the comment to that said, essentially the rationale is the Rec Commission fulfills virtually all of the functions of the old park commissioners. That when the town acts on a motion under a warrant article that has some commentary with factual statements in it, I think it's fair to treat that as sort of a legislative finding of fact, and which has significance, of course. So that kind of leads us towards the Recreation Commission, and then we see what other towns have done. It was noted in the comment in 2013 that 60 other towns have a representative of the Recreation Commission having a permanent seat on the CPC, and that of 8 of the neighboring towns, if you will, and there's a chart in the back of the report that lists which 8 of the South towns. Those 8 towns, only Cohasset has a Board of Park Commissioners, and the other 7 who do not have a Board of Park Commissioners any longer have the Recreation Commission, or a couple of towns call it the Park and Recreation Commission, have that body designate someone to have the old park commissioner's permanent seat on the CPC. So we think it is most appropriate for the Recreation Commission to be designated as the 5th entity, if you will, the successor, at least for the purposes for which we're concerned, to take the 5th permanent seat on the CPC. And we have proposed a warrant article that's attached to the report as well, but I'd like to substitute a new one. the article that we proposed would have essentially, would say, strike Section 1 of Article 38 of the bylaws. Section 1 is the provision that it says one member of the Conservation Commission, one member of the Historical Commission, et cetera, et cetera. And then we said so that the following language would be inserted instead, so the bylaw would now read as follows. That seemed unnecessary to say, here's what we're going to say, and to repeat it again. So if I may, I'll pass along these copies of the revised, if you will, proposed warrant article.
I'm sure Betty gets one.
Now, in discussions with, among the committee and with the chair of the Community Preservation Commission, it became apparent that if we're going to clean up the language of Section 1, there are some other things we could do to it. One is to drop the language that dealt with staggered terms in the at-large appointments, because it's no longer necessary. And also, instead of repeating after each designation that the appointment shall be for 3 years, we said, why don't we just say that once? So now we say that the term of office of each member shall be 3 years. In case of a vacancy, the designating or appointing authority shall designate or appoint a new member to fill the remainder of the unexpired term, and then list what the source of the membership on that committee should be, and that's the end of the amendment. And frankly, we think it is as simple as that. Mm-hmm. That what we're dealing with is the overarching question is the composition of what should the composition of the CPC be, and we think it should be. The only change should be to delete the portion that says it must be someone from the Selectmen and say it should be someone from Recreation. Of course, it already says now should be someone from Recreation. So we just taken off the Selectmen. And I must say that among the committee, we thought that this was an unnecessary burden for the Selectmen. Now, we've never heard any complaints by any Selectmen about their responsibilities in the CPC, but certainly no one can say the Selectmen don't have enough other things to do. And one of the important jobs of a member of the CPC is to not only attend meetings, but to serve as a project manager for the different projects for which funding is sought, and that too is very time-consuming. And then I suppose you get the question is, would a select person feel uncomfortable having been project manager of a project that was recommended by the CPC, and then take off the CPC hat and get up at town meeting and put on the selectman's hat and said, oh, by the way, this is a great project, and mostly because of that great project manager, But I'm not suggesting there's a conflict that's glaring out there, but it's an awkward situation that is completely unnecessary. So at the end of the day, we think an amendment, as we proposed to Article 38, does the job.
So I just want to start out by thanking the three of you and thanking Kathy Reardon and Alyssa Tully, who also served on the committee. Just, as background for people who may be hearing about this for the first time, earlier in the fall, actually the current CPC chair, Bob Curley, approached this board about the possibility of making a modification so that the selectman position, instead of it being a requirement that a selectman fill a CPC role, affecting a change where that could be optional for the reasons that Andy mentioned. And we thought that it would be worthwhile to not only look at that in a little bit more detail, but at the same time examine the composition of the CPC to see if any other changes should be affected. It was the committee's conclusion that isn't necessary. And what the committee's done, and there is Andy's been referencing a 13-page report. There is a document with a benchmarking of other communities, which is very helpful. So this is very thorough and a very rigorous analysis done by the committee. One thing that has come up as this work has been done, as we put warrant articles together, is that we run everything by town council. And the role of town council is to make sure that things are in good legal standing, et cetera. And what council has asked us, and the committee provided council with this, with the report, council's asked to look at it to ensure that the way we are going about making this change does not have any unintended consequences on anything else that the selectmen do. And that's a helpful step that we take so that we understand it all. And it's great that we're doing it right now, because after January 20th, things get pretty busy. Paul, I've spoken to both Andy and John in the last few days to say, if council's guidance is to affect this change in a different way through a special act, which is an alternative that the committee doesn't feel is necessary, but if council forms an opinion on that, the committee's opinion is that we would go the special act route. They believe that affecting this change is what's most important. As I said, they believe that may not be necessary, but if that's what we do. So I think what I'd be prepared to do tonight is to offer a motion that the selectmen put forward an article to affect the recommendation of the CPC task force, subject to input from council. And then by January 20th, we'll have the conversations with council and either insert this into the warrant as we've received it or modify as needed.
Is that your motion?
Yeah, I think
Second.
so. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if
Discussion?
anyone else.
I'd just like to thank you, gentlemen and the ladies, that joined you for this hard work. I like the practical reasons very much. I thought you honed right in on the essential point there. Any discussion?
Okay.
Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Appreciate it.
Okay. And now we have a problem, because we don't have our colleague with us.
Okay. Candidates should probably wait outside.
Okay. Do you want to take something before we get into that, or do you want to wait for Mr. Gannon, or how do you want to do this? Hi. Mr. Gannon isn't here yet. We anticipate his arrival shortly.
If you'd like, I can do some of the votes that you have.
Now, I think Mr. Gannon needs to be here for the Lincoln Maritime because he and I are the only members who can vote.
Okay.
And I know he wants to speak to the transfer request, so I think you need to...
Okay. Well, why don't we... Yeah. All right. For those of you that are candidates for consideration, I would very much appreciate it. You certainly don't have to, but just so that the playing field is even, if you don't mind waiting outside until you're called. And the order, as determined by someone other than me, is James Blakey goes first, Clark Frazier, Jack Gamache, and Jennifer Gay Smith. So that is the order that we'll take this.
They look alphabetical to me.
And I would invite the planning board to join us at the table. Recognize...
You want to sit here? I can vacate. I don't need to be here for this. Just so they don't confuse me with anybody else.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you. We have revised questions, so I'm going to give you those.
Okay, thank you.
And I put a name next to the question, if you're fine doing that.
We even get to...
We assigned question.
Okay.
Let Sarah sit over there.
You want me to sit over here? Are you okay with that?
Sure, whatever you want to do. This is your pick. Okay, ladies and gentlemen at home, just to introduce everybody, Mr. Gary Torndorf Dick, Mr. William Ramsey, Ms. Judy Sneath, Mary, myself, and Ms. Sarah Corey. She's the chair of the Hingham Planning Board. Right?
Yep.
Okay. Why don't we have the first person in? Thank you, Bill.
Where would you like the candidate to sit?
How do you want to do this? Hi, how are you, sir? Would you join us at the end of the table, if you would? And the microphone needs to be near you so people can hear you.
Hello, hello, hello. Is that good enough?
How are you tonight, and thank you. I'd like to extend a greeting from the Board of Selectmen. Joining us is the Hingham Planning Board, as you know. We're here tonight to speak to you and 3 other Hingham residents who have put their names forward for consideration for an appointment to the Planning Board. Sarah, is there anything you want to?
No, I just appreciate the people of Hingham's willingness to apply for these positions, so thank you, Mr. Blakey.
Sure.
We have about 7 questions for you, so we'll just kind of rotate around, and I'll start with...
Can I ask a quick one?
Absolutely.
I actually, in getting rid of this, because I'm a little OCD, I read several, like a year's worth of your minutes, the planning board's minutes, and I noticed that there's a thing called is it a Mullins affidavit or something?
That's correct. That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, is Mr. Gannon going to fill out one of those? Or is he going to be here later, or does it
I'm
matter?
trying to kill a little time, anticipating that he's going to walk through the door any second.
Okay.
So should
I mean,
we
I'd be
wait?
happy
Well,
to
then
wait if...
I think it
but-
would be appropriate to wait if we think he's going to be here in a few minutes. Just because that would be the most fair?
Yeah,
for-
no, I want him here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody want any water? I got water
You know,
here.
I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief recess. I know it's a little out of the ordinary, but we'd really like our colleague here to join us for this. So we'll take about a 5 or 10 minute break, and then we'll be back.
Didn't mean to throw a wrench in.
No, it's a good
Thank you
question.
for asking.
Good question.
Okay, we're in recess. Good evening, everyone. Little modification to the agenda tonight. Our colleague advises us that he'll be here momentarily. And rather than get into the interviews for the planning board candidates, what we're going to do is we're going to hear from the Department of Public Works, Mr. Roger Fernandez and Mr. Harry Sylvester, with respect to a road building presentation that we anticipate, and this will be good for the planning board to see too. So, gentlemen, would you join us at the table, please? And fill us in. Thanks for coming in early.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We've got you for about 15 minutes.
Okay, we'll make it quick. Maybe I could read the memo, or would you like me just to?
You have the floor.
Okay, so ostensibly what we're putting before you today is an initiative that would recommend to the town a bond issuance to augment the current road construction plan, the 5-year road construction plan. Currently, we anticipate over the next 5 years spending through a combination of town funds and Chapter 90 funding, $5,242,000, and that's contingent upon level funding at the state level. For those folks who don't know, we receive the most of our funding for our roads through Chapter 90, which is the money provided to us by the state to reconstruct our roads. Typically, that's about $750,000 a year. And our proposal would recommend that the town consider a bond issuance of $2,242,000 over a 5-year period. $1,852,000 of which would be applied directly to infrastructure, while the remaining $390,000 would be applied to staffing needs. That would be over a period of 5 years. That's not a one-time, a 1-year amount. The position that we're recommending, once that 5-year period has expired, we would be recommending that position be filled permanently, based on not only this additional funding, but also our current workloads that we anticipate will not diminish. So provided to you under a separate cover on a separate page is a spreadsheet. In that spreadsheet, it lists the additional roads that we would be able to add. Those are listed in red. At the bottom of that page, the total for those locations are also listed in red. And they include a variety of different approaches with respect to construction, things that we've talked about in the past, which some of those would receive full depth reconstruction, others would receive level and microsurfacing. That would put our roads, the percentage of our roads in good to excellent condition, up to 92% of our roads. Up to 92% of our roads would be in good to excellent condition in the next 5 years. However, the caveat that we put out there is that during that time and during the prior 5 years, as with any infrastructure, there's a certain amount of degradation. So some of the roads that are excellent condition today would slip to good. But through this funding mechanism, we do anticipate that the quality will draw level, and by that we mean that we wouldn't need this kind of money infusion into the system anymore. The current funding would allow us to maintain the road quality to a good or excellent condition going forward. So ostensibly, this money would accelerate the road building program to where prior we had presented a 20-year plan. We're in year 16, I think now. I'm sorry, 15, and this would put us way ahead of that schedule. So hopefully that's concise enough.
I would just, for the benefit of the public, earlier this year, we get a lot of requests from people. Roger does as well. As people see all the improvement to a lot of the roads around town, they often look to their own road and say, gosh, when can we do my road? And while $1 million a year sounds like a lot of money, it actually only paves a couple of miles of streets. And the more in disrepair a road, the more it costs to repair it. And so really where this is coming from is that we're hearing from citizens that we're not moving fast enough as a town to improve the roads. So this would be a program to, to accelerate that. Roger, one of the questions that, as I was looking at how this was going to, what was going to happen from 2015 to 2020, it looks as if by the year 2017, we would have no more roads in the failure status, and that by 2020, instead of 8 miles of road being in poor condition, only 2 miles of roadway would be in poor condition.
That's correct.
And so we'd be moving along. I guess one of the questions I had looking at it was the 2 miles that is still in poor condition in 2020. Is there an opportunity to perhaps do some of those instead of some of the fair roads, or is that a function of where they're located? I just feel like by 2020, if you're a citizen and your house is on one of those 2 miles of poor roads, you're going to be pretty discouraged.
Well, one of the things that this rating system does is it gives sort of a larger overview. By that I mean, even in the failure category, there could be a road of, that might be a couple of 100 feet long that we might consider failure. But so as a rounding exercise, you see 0, but maybe that's 0.12 something miles. I think the same would be true for the poor condition, where you see a decrease from 8 to 6 to 3 to 3 to 2 to 2. So maybe that too, if we were to round those numbers off, or round those numbers to the actual segments, it might be more like 1.5 or 1.6. So the other thing that takes place is on an annual basis, Harry takes a look at where we are at the end of the year. And we've done this now for 6 years. We budget a certain amount, we target those roads, we don't overreach in terms of what we promise is going to be done. So then at the end of that year, we reassess what's left in the budget, and on every year, and just about every year and every occasion, we've been able to go out and attack some of these locations that might not have been on the list. Yep. So to answer your question, those locations where we might have a smaller segment of road or a mile of road that might be in poor, I'm pretty confident that by the end of this plan, or the year 2020, certainly before that, I think we would have had those off the list as well.
And I would just add that we're going to talk a little bit later about sort of some of the funding for this, but this would be, the funding for this might take the shape and form of a warrant article, but I appreciate that both of you are bringing this plan forward. I think it shows that you're listening to what people are saying, and I think we're all together trying to be responsive to that. And I also think it's reflective of the great work that's been done in the town over the past 6 years to improve the qualities of the road. I think 6 years ago we had about a $24 million liability. I think we've spent $6 million, but we've gotten the liability down to 15. So what that means is that we've made smart and great choices, and I hope as a town that we will be able to consider what is a really solid proposal. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd echo that. I have a more practical question. Are you comfortable that the utilities are going to be able to keep pace with the work you're doing in terms of any kind of upgrades to the gas, water, phone lines?
Yeah, the gas company's been working, been very cooperative as far as getting their gas mains replaced. They're a little bit behind. I mean, they're down there replacing the gas main in Whitten Ave as we speak right now. Normally we don't allow, utility replacements in the wintertime, but being this Whitten Ave's on the construction schedule for the spring. But they've caught up in pretty good shape, and we meet every year, go over their punch lists as far as what roads they want to replace and what roads we're going to reconstruct. And to add to that, I mean, this list has been published and has been on the website
and it's for utility companies primarily. So, I mean, if people see their road on the list now, I mean, this is providing the funds are available when the season starts. But we needed to put these on the list so the utility companies could formulate a plan as far as keeping ahead of the, the reconstruction.
Okay. Okay.
Roger and Harry, one other question for you. This is, I think it's a $2.2 million request, and, you folks have been through the budget process enough to know that sometimes it's hard to fund $2.2 million in 1 year. If we were to try to perhaps fund this in a couple installments, should we be looking to do at least 2 years at a time or 3? In other words, like if we said, gee, we're going to go to town meeting and maybe ask for the incremental funding for just 16 and 17 to try to manage the cost. How much of this do you need at once in order to plan the work and coordinate with the utilities?
I mean, one thing that's great about the list is that we've provided is it breaks down the cost for each year.
Yep.
So if you decided to fund year 16 and 17 with the increase that we're talking about, just for those 2 years, it's available to you. We ideally would like to know at least a year in advance of what might come available to us. And then in year 18, if that same exercise were to take place, that'd be okay with us. It wouldn't affect our schedule.
So 2 years.
So,
thank you.
So that option is definitely on the table. Yeah.
But at least, I'm also hearing from you, at least 2 years.
Yeah, well, what it does, it allows us to plan, certainly, and it allows, to answer Mr. Healy's point, allows us to plan with the utility companies as well. That kind of notification is something we would need.
And the other thing Roger had mentioned earlier is they do a lot of their work earlier in the season, try to get it done quicker. So if you give them the money in April and they haven't planned it or programmed it, they're not sure they're going to get it, it's just going to impact their ability to get it done. So I think, we would want to do something like this in 2-year bites.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything you want to add or no?
No, I don't want to jump in the middle.
I noticed most of it's level and seal, so you're bringing fair to good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a point. If you look through the years, the reclaim and repave, which is basically reconstruction, those type of jobs are decreasing, and level and seal, which is generally a maintenance process, is becoming more, so we're really catching up on the roads that are, in shape, bad enough shape that we have to reconstruct.
Okay, good.
And the dollar goes a lot farther. You can see the amount we're spending as the years go on decrease somewhat, but to, Mary's question earlier, we left some, some cushion in there so we could add some of these roads that may have failed, and anything that degrades over the winter quicker than we expected, like a couple of roads that just past winter, we have money in the accounts to attack those roads as well.
Quick question. In terms of the level and seal, just so I'm correct, is that the seal coat?
Yeah, the micro seal is a seal, and we level it with an asphalt, regular hot mix asphalt, put the profile back on the road, and then we seal it for the wearing surface is the seal.
Because I know that works in some places, but I think there was a gentleman that mentioned, I can't remember the road, but I know someone else would probably remember him. He was in here, they had a big group. Was it?
I think it's Whitcomb.
Whitcomb, where it wasn't lasting. And I know from where I live, my area, there's been some work which we appreciate, but it doesn't seem to last. A couple of roads, and they may be on the list to get done, and so it may be, it may be a moot point, but I'm saying that's my only concern, is sometimes it doesn't seem to last. And
well, the micro seal, we've resurfaced every wearing surface of every road we've reconstructed. I think it's in the last 7 years. The wearing surface is the seal, is the micro seal, and we have no problem with it all. The roads that we have paved, I think there was Beale Street is a prime example, the lower end of Beale Street between Faulkner Road and William B. Terry Drive. We put hot mix on a binder course, 3 inches of binder, and hot mix wearing surface. That's the only road we did that to. And the section from North Street to Faulkner Road, put the 3 inches of binder hot mix down, and then we put the seal on it. That section of road is like we did it yesterday. The other road's starting to pothole, crack, and split with the hot mix. Hot mix isn't the industry has gone downhill.
And maybe it was a different process they used, because I know
It sounds like.
it's Liberty Road. I mean, I know there was some work done on it, but then,
You're talking, yeah, but that's been down, I think, 16 years.
no, I'm talking about.
Oh, the crack seal, that was crack seal.
Crack seal.
We generally, normally, if we're gonna level and seal a road, we crack seal it first, cover all the cracks, seal them up, then we come in and we put the hot mix down, and then we, with the wear and service of the micro seal afterwards.
Thank you for explaining that.
Okay.
Questions from the audience? Yes, sir. Stand up there and identify yourself by name and address, please.
Jack Gamache, 29 Governor Lawn. This is probably a question that Harry can answer. I'm not sure. I live up in Otis Hill.
Yeah.
Obviously, we did the roads up there, and, you know, we found that we had transite in the roads up there, but they still got paved over. Do we have any leverage over the water company on some of these, you know, that product that we don't want it in our town? And
Well, I'll defer that to Roger, but, you know.
So you're right, there are roads, for those who don't know what transite means, there are asbestos water pipes in your roads, not a lot, but there are sections of town that still have asbestos water pipes that were put in during the war effort when metal and steel was at a premium, I guess, before my time. So, don't mean to represent the water company, but basically, they have certain DEP, EPA requirements with respect to water testing and how much actual asbestos, if any, could be in a water line, and where there are existing transite pipes, they're not in any non-conformance, if you will, with any of those federal and state agencies. Again, that's not in our purview, but we're aware of those. But what we do is, as Harry mentioned, Paul mentioned, we do try to coordinate with them where those older pipes exist, especially transite pipes, where they're more prone to failure. It almost looks like a paper mache, if you will, the pipe itself. There's the issue of just the perception with transite and asbestos pipe, and then the issues associated with its durability. We don't want to have those in roads where we can avoid it. So we continue to pressure them where we can to get them to try to replace that stuff when we're redoing the roads.
do we have any leverage over the water company before we pave these roads?
We will soon, it sounds like, maybe.
The answer would be, we work cooperatively as best we can with them.
Yeah.
Just like the gas company. They're private entities, and, you know, we ask and we try to work through it with them.
Right.
And with the gas company, and we're trying to get a gas line replaced, you look at it, it's 110 years old, and I have a leak history that I have, you know, looking at street opener permits to repeal leaks. I can go, I want this 100-year-old pipe that has a leak history replaced. And they generally don't argue. They did one year, and they ended up paving Main Street from Middle Street down to the square after we paved it 2 years prior to that. But now they cooperate very readily. But it's hard with the gas pipe. If you don't have leak history, age, I mean, you really, you know, I mean, water pipes, you just can't, you don't have a lot of leverage to get that replaced.
Gas is gas, obviously, you know. Asbestos is another product, and some of these pipes that I'm seeing coming out of the ground are very thin, which means it's getting back into us and not, you know, it's just a question.
No, it's a good question.
Thank you, Mr. Gamache. Okay, anybody else? Yes, Gary.
Thanks, Paul. Gary Tondorf, Dick, 1029 Main Street. I had a question about Lower Gardner Street. Back in the 90s and about 15 years ago, there was a hot top put on it that was very thin, and it had a pea stone, kind of an admixture into it to seal the road. And I'm wondering what is in the plan for Gardner Street, because there's quite a bit of cracking and deterioration at the perimeter of the road, especially at the curves. And I didn't know where Gardner Street, Lower Gardner, was placed on the list. And is there anything we can do preemptively if it's a little bit further down the list than we might think?
Who do we have Gardner Street?
Lower Gardner Street was a good deal. It was reconstructed, reclaimed, as you see, reclaim, repave, and that was, final seal was put on that. That was a stone chip seal. To my recollection, that was the only road in town we've done in the last 38 years with a stone chip seal. There's a rubber chip seal, came highly recommended. There's a lot of downsides to that chip seal, especially after it first goes down, there's stone everywhere. We don't use it any longer. The main portion of the road is still in decent shape. The gutter lines should be, you know, have to, a little bit of maintenance has to go to the gutter lines by, you know, formulating, repairing berms and things of that nature. As far as the long-term plans is repaving that road. Structurally, and the integrity of that road is still in pretty decent shape for the gravelway. So that's around some of the manholes have decayed a little bit, they'll have to be maintained and repaired, but generally, it's in pretty good shape.
Excellent. I just also wanted to thank you for repairing the sidewalks before the winter, which is much appreciated by the neighbors.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, gentlemen, is anybody else in the audience? Good. Well, thank you very much for
Thank you
coming
very
in and
much.
taking this initiative.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. The people are going to be happy about this one. Okay, we're going to resume. Appreciate your patience. We wanted everybody to be a part of this, so at this point, we're going to resume our seats, and we're going to start with Mr. Blakey, be the first candidate.
You want to sit there? No, I'll sit there. Sarah, you sit over here?
I was going to sit over there. Thank you.
How are you? Good.
So did you see how this was the question?
Okay,
Yes,
it's
thank you.
8:15, and I want to welcome you, Mr. Blakey. If you could, for the benefit of the audience, folks at home, just give us a little background of who you are and what motivates you to apply for this position. We're going to ask you a series of questions. We're all going to kind of run through it. Everybody's going to get the same questions, so.
Yeah, I apologize for, I didn't make any friends.
No, that was a fair question and an appropriate one as well.
Okay. To start with, I'm very interested in this position. I'm a lawyer, and I have a resume if anybody's interested.
Sure.
That's right. Maybe I should hand it out afterwards. So it's not
That's fine. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been in the town since 1992. I have significant professional experience in master planning, siting and zoning, and development in general. I find it intriguing, especially some of the little tricks that people come up with to shoehorn their way through some of the regulations, and also some, well, I heard the term earlier tonight, but unintended consequences that sometimes come out of regulations that are well intended. And I think I'm a problem solver. In the past, I've had extensive international travel for work, so I really haven't been able to get involved in town affairs. I recently cut my work week from 5 days. Well, I don't travel anymore, pretty much. I've cut my work week from 5 days to 2 days, so I have some time on my hands, and I'm just interested. I think I have the interest and the skill set and the time to maybe help the town a little bit.
Okay, thanks very much. We have a series of questions. Should we just lead off, Gary, then Bill, and then just go around the horn?
Sure.
Okay. Gary, you're up.
Yes, welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
To the process. I'm very glad that you put your hat in the ring, as they say. Question I have is, what are your feelings about development in South Hingham?
I guess I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I mean, I'm residential development, commercial development.
Maybe I could maybe clarify a little bit the question. I guess I'm interested in the balance between the commercial and retail development and the protection of the character of the residential neighborhoods in South Hingham, and I'm curious and interested in as to your feelings on that and your approach to that.
I definitely believe in residential areas being preserved. I think you can work out a reasonable balance between those two things. The 53 strip through Hingham is not, to me, is not great looking. I mean, unrestricted development in that area could, eventually you're going to look like 53 in Weymouth or in Quincy. But I think it's important to preserve the neighborhoods. I also think it's important to have some amount of commercial development in this town because, the costs go up every year for the town, and I think that it's helpful to add to the tax base. So I sort of favor a balance between those two things. It's hard to, in the abstract, it's hard to explain exactly what I mean by that, but it's definitely a balancing act, and I think it's definitely important to preserve our neighborhoods. I live on Elm Street, which is nearby, and actually I came here directly from Manhattan, and one of the reasons I'm on Elm Street is actually because it's a lovely residential neighborhood, but within a half a mile from where I live, I can walk to 3 or 4 restaurants and a drugstore and the movie theater and the liquor store, and so I think commercial development and residential space can coexist.
Thank you.
Sure.
My question for you, speaking of balancing, is how would you balance the rules of our permitting process with residents who make a convincing case that there should be an exception to our rules?
Carefully. It's a tough thing. I mean, I think it tends to be a case-by-case thing. There are things where it's an order of magnitude. I have my family has a summer cottage up in Connecticut, and I'll just draw you a little picture here. But there's our house is here, and then there's another lot next door to us, and the lots are both deep and skinny. Actually, I drew this one wrong, but they're deep and skinny. There's a road going across in front of our house, and then it sort of sticks into the side of their lot. So, and there's a little stream up here. So this is the front. It's a bad picture, but our front yard is on this street, and but under the zoning bylaws in this town in Connecticut, since the street enters their lot from the side, that's their front yard. And they have a house that's here, and they wanted to put a little room on the back of it, and they discovered that because the front setback was on the side of their house and the rear setback was on the side of their house, and it was a narrow lot, that they were under the regulation as it existed. They only had a buildable lot about 1.5 feet wide. So they could have put a bowling alley in behind their house. You guys aren't seeing this picture, but basically and it was just this anomaly of the street coming in from the side of their lot rather than in the town declaring that to be the front of their lot. So it was. I mean, I actually went to they applied for a variance. I went up to Connecticut and said I was the closest to butter. I was the most affected, and I didn't object to the variance because it was just crazy. There are situations where the regulation it's well-intended in 90% of the time, but once in a while it just doesn't fit, and you got to accommodate that, I think.
And the follow-up question I have to that, in your diagram there, do you believe
Sorry about this.
Do you believe that abutter objections alone is sufficient evidence to deny a special permit?
Abutter objections alone?
No, there's no evidence in the record of from a traffic engineer or from a peer review engineer, but you have abutters who appear before us making very convincing arguments that we should either heavily condition a application or we should deny it.
I think you have to listen to the abutters clearly and pay great attention to them. But I think there's also there are questions of hardship and reasonable accommodation. I think that you have to balance those things. I mean, if a bunch of neighbors just come in and want to be, for whatever reason, obstructionist, but the request is not outrageous and it's an accommodation of a difficulty. I think one of the standards is hardship, and again, it's a balancing act.
Thank you for your patience tonight. My question is a little bit more general. Just would love a sense of your role on a previous board or committee. What do you bring to a group like this? There are 5 of us, and we each kind of go at things in a different way. And I think we try to complement each other in getting to a decision. So I'd just love to get a sense of kind of what you think your best role is in a committee setting.
I think I'm a good listener, first of all, I think, and I'm also a good reader. But I think I do try and listen to people and look for. I mean, one of one of the things that lawyers do is negotiate stuff, and often that means sitting there and you have a client, there's another person on the other side, but your object is to bring people together in some sort of compromise that makes sense. And I think I have some skill in that area. I'm also good at reading, actually in a connection with a project that I've worked on in the Bahamas. I actually wrote legislation for it's a 3,000 to 5,000 acre development on a southern island in the Bahamas, and I actually wrote legislation that was submitted to the Bahamas Parliament and passed, which dealt with land planning and taxation and all kinds of regulation. So I'm a good, you'd mentioned before that part of your process, at least this time of year, has to do with commas and ifs, ands, and buts and stuff, and I happen to, I'm a contracts lawyer, so I know quite a bit about that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for coming in. My question is, how would where you live and where you work shape and contribute to the planning board?
Well, I live in Hingham, and I work in Hingham, so I guess I'm not quite sure of the thrust of the...
I think what the question is getting at is where you work and live in Hingham, and how might that influence how you participate as a member of the planning board?
Well, I live in the town, I work in the town, I do travel very, very occasionally, but I can be here every Monday night if that's what anybody needs. And I
would where you live and work would that predispose or influence you in any way to decisions that might come before the planning board?
Well, yes, I suppose.
That's what the question is getting at.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I understand the notion of recusal if somebody's trying to. I mean, actually, this is not the zoning board. This is the planning board. So it's maybe the issue is a bit less acute. If I was on the zoning board and my next door neighbor was looking for a variance, I would probably back off whether I approved of it or did not approve of it. But everybody has a little NIMBY in them. I try and be aware of that concept and step away from it.
Thank you.
Was that an answer? Oh, okay.
Hi, Mr. Blakey. I have no right or wrong answer or expectation. I'm just trying to delve into your reaction to this question. One of the things that the planning board does is it advances zoning bylaw changes at town meeting. Do you have any sense presently as to the strengths and weaknesses of our existing zoning bylaw, and is there anything within that bylaw that you think could be strengthened?
I do have one thought that I've just sort of been toying around with in partly in preparation for this. I read the Hingham bylaws, and then I looked at a couple of neighboring towns just to get a sense of the territory. And I did notice a provision in both Situate and Marshfield that I thought was interesting, that we may or may not have something similar to it in the Hingham bylaw. And I'm still a little confused about something in the Hingham bylaw. But and maybe this is a topic that's been debated extensively and is a dead issue and so forth. But in Marshfield and Situate, they have this sort of accessory use of residence provision. You're smiling, so I'm suspecting this is well known.
Well, it's been talked about.
It's been talked about. Okay. Yeah.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting. I can see both sides of the issue, and I could probably, if I could argue either side of the issue. It did occur to me that if we tried something here that involved, well, first of all, a trial, and maybe a few of these permits on a lottery basis or something. I mean, I bowl on Mondays with a guy who lives on South Street, and he's in his late 80s. He's an empty nester. He's bouncing around in this big old house, and his wife passed away. And if there was a little apartment in that place that was filled, if you could have a system where municipal employees in Hingham, like cops and policemen, and firefighters and school teachers and other municipal employees, young newcomers to the town who couldn't possibly afford to live here otherwise, could rent a below market rate apartment in this guy's house. He could probably use the money. It would increase the value of his real estate, thereby actually allowing the town to tax him a little more heavily. It would mean that an elderly person like that would have a young person hanging around who might occasionally go up a ladder for him instead of him going up the ladder and so forth. And it would encourage people who work for the town to live here.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, that's and obviously you guys have had a much longer time to think about this issue than me. So anyway,
good answer. Thank you.
Sure.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Just in terms of the planning board, and I don't know if you followed the decisions, any decisions that you disagreed with or may have changed if you were voting.
I can't say that I have seen anything that I've objected to.
That's fine.
That was easy.
I have a quick question and then
Sure.
another question. Are you willing to run for the seat in May?
Yes.
That's my quick question. And
I mean, this is public embarrassment already. So if the process of going to
yeah, it's a different process of public embarrassment.
Yes, exactly.
Lots of standing at the dump. Yeah.
Yeah, I was on the way out the door, and my kid said something, and I said, "So you're going to be at the dump with a sign, right?"
Yeah.
So.
Is there any question that you wish we had asked you?
Let me see what I was ready to talk about. No.
Okay, I think, thank you very much.
All right.
We appreciate your time. And
Thank you all.
Thank you
all. All right.
We'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next candidate on the list is Clark Frazier. I'll go get Mr. Frazier.
Yeah.
Clark Frazier?
There he is. Welcome.
Hi, Mr. Frazier. Thank you for your patience. Welcome.
Good evening.
What we're going to do is we're going to ask a series of questions that each of us asks all four candidates. If you could just begin by giving us a little background about yourself and the reasons why you're stepping forward for this position tonight.
Well, I've been in and out of the town of Hingham for more than 20 years, and I thought this might be a chance to give something back. I've had, earlier in my life, quite a strong community background. I was elected to South End Project Area Committee for 6 years, which all we did actually was review development. That was the main function of that body. And then I was also appointed to the Boston Air Pollution Control Commission to regulate downtown parking. I was chairman for 3 years, and that was under the parking freeze. And I was also involved in some of the Central Artery Southwest Corridor. And I also wrote a substantial part of the landmark district for the South End. I was chairman of that committee. It took us 7 years to finally figure out a way to get it through and get all the politicians to approve it. It was a major. So I earned my stripes elsewhere. And then I got appointed to the traffic committee. I was also on the Hingham Transportation Committee 20 years ago. And some people say, and I'm not sure it's true, that we proposed an underpass under Hingham Square for the train. And I thought that, well, we'll propose it as a straw man, and then the MBTA will make some other concessions. They'd never build it. Well, they built it. So here I am.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Eric?
Clark, welcome, and thank you for putting your hat in the ring. And,
Welcome.
Giving something back to the town. My question involves your feelings about development in South Hingham, and the question really is directed to how would you make the balance work between retail and commercial development and protecting the character of the residential neighborhoods in South Hingham and also in the rest of the town?
You would ask the area I'm least familiar with. I know that there's, even further south, there's a disconnect between what the town wants, development, and what the MAPC suggested that the master plan not do, because you want 5 million square feet of commercial development. Marlboro wants 6 million square feet. So maybe need to look at more housing in those areas, although that's totally isolated. But I think the character of Whiting Street is a mess, and I don't know what you would do unless you had more continuous buildings along the street, which would protect the residential areas from noise. But I think that's going to be a tough problem.
Thank you.
Clark, I enjoy working with you on the traffic committee.
Thank you.
It's been a good couple months. So, my question is, how would you balance the rules of our permitting process with residents who make a convincing case that there should be an exception to those rules?
Normally, well, in some cases, these, what are we talking about, site plan review?
We could use site plan review as an example.
Yeah, I think you just have to look at each individual case, because I think the rules are fairly well laid out. Although I would hope that the town would go in the direction of low-impact development, and there may be some neighbors may not like that as much because you'd be clustering buildings. And then the other issue that I don't think is adequately addressed now is stormwater, but and there are going to be new regulations coming down, I believe, that will require the town to do more treatment on site. But that just has to be handled on a case-by-case basis. Normally in the South End, I was always in the middle, and sometimes I felt when both sides were mad at me that I had the right position, but it's, we did get things done.
Thank you.
Hi, Clark. Thanks for your patience tonight. We work very closely together as a board of 5 people on the planning board, and I am interested in knowing how your role in the boards that you, in the committees that you've participated in before. It sounds like you have extensive experience decision-making in groups. I'm just wondering what strengths you bring to that process.
My strength is, well, I was also, I should say, the vice chairman of the CPAC, and I managed the staff. We had 2 staff people. I think my strength is being able to find a common ground. I was able to, in a couple of cases, engineer some agreements related to Southwest Corridor. I helped the people in Dorchester get the train line. I didn't actually go to the meeting. I said to them, ask for 3 stations. I said, I don't know why I knew they would get them. They came back and I said, how many stations did you get? And they said, well, we got 2. I said, why did you only get 2? They said, well, we're afraid to ask for 3 when they asked for 2. So I've been tried to bring 2 sides together. I've been able to, if I can find a plausible common ground, I've been able to do that.
Great.
Good evening, and thank you for coming in. Judy asked about kind of, the skills that you would bring, to the planning board. My question is around how where you live in town helps shape and inform, and how that might help shape and contribute to the rest of the planning board.
Interesting question. Last summer, last 2 summers, I've been kayaking off my backyard. So I've got a real good idea of what Hingham looks like now from the water. And sometimes there are things going on that we don't know about. So I'm very interested in ACEC issues, water view. I was involved in what turned out to be a successful effort to keep the Avalon development away from the shore. I don't know whether you know where that is, but when you go from West Corner, you'll see the Avalon development, but as you go to the very narrow rapids where I live, you can't see the development from the housing there. And we spent a year and a half with the Hull Conservation Commission and Planning Board and the town administrator, and finally worked with the developer and came up with a solution that kept the footprint of the development back away from the shore. So I'm very interested in waterfront issues, shore issues.
Thank you.
Hi, Clark. The planning board brings proposals to changes in the zoning bylaw to town meeting, every year. What do you see as the weaknesses and the strengths of our existing zoning bylaw, and is there anything that you would advance with respect to that?
Personal opinion, I may not fly, is the floor area ratio for residential, which you don't have right now. And in some cases are getting really large houses on small lots, maybe a little more design review. And I think, as I was told, that there will be new requirements coming down for managing stormwater. Those are areas I read through it. There are also a few forward references in it. I don't know, parts of the zoning code are really read very well, and other parts are a little difficult to get through.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Clark, how are you?
Oh, good. How are you?
Welcome. Any decision of the planning board that sticks out in your mind that you may not have agreed with?
Well, I don't know whether the planning board was involved. I know that while I was gone, a house appeared in the floodplain at the off of Rockland Street. It may have all been as of right. I don't know. Nothing sticks out in my mind. I haven't been following detail. I would have wondered about the placement of some of the stores at the shipyard to make it more walkable. It seemed like the placement of the CVS, the Trader Joe's, seem unrelated to the rest of the shipyard development. And I understand the issue with having the DPW and the Hewitt Cove parking lot right in the middle, separating residential from the businesses, but I'm wondering if that couldn't have been configured in a different way. But that's just a question, maybe not.
Thank you.
A quick question and then another question. Are you willing to run for the election in May?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I'll be the politician here. I've got my nomination papers in here if you want to sign them.
You are prepared. Is there any question that you wish we had asked?
No, I think you've asked a really good set of questions. You might say, why are you doing this? But you asked that. And how much time does it take? I mean, that's one of the questions. It seems like this is one of the busier boards.
Yeah, we meet every Monday. Holidays, we don't meet, but oftentimes we'll meet on a Wednesday or Thursday of that week, some of that time.
Yeah.
And the meetings are anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. And then
We don't meet that much in the summer.
Yeah, in the
Okay,
summer we
that's
go
good.
every other. Yeah, we try. And then, some time to prepare for the meetings. So it
Yeah.
is a commitment. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I gathered that. That was kind of the commitment I put in years ago when I was involved in South End. When the other thing that I worked out, you asked me working something out. I worked out the agreement to get the brick sidewalks. That was something that otherwise would not have happened.
In the South End?
Yeah,
Terrific.
we did that incrementally. First we got a strip of brick and the concrete, and then we got all brick after they looked at the cost.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Who's next?
Gamache.
Good evening, Mr. Gamache. Nice to see you again.
Good evening to everyone.
What we're doing tonight is we're asking a series of questions. Each of us is asking the same questions to all four candidates. If you could just, by way of introduction, give us a little background about yourself, and we'll start off with Gary, and we'll end up with the chair of the planning board.
Where do you start? Lived in the town 43 years. Own a company, a contractor, developer, architect. I've developed a number of properties, homes in the town over the years. It's a design-led design-build firm, which is different than most. It's run by an architect, so we do a lot of heavy commercial industrial projects. Right now, we don't have any projects going on in town, and I would think that I would not have any, being industrial commercial. Had 2 sons, grew up in the town, and that's kind of where I've been through the years. I can go on and on and on, but that's kind of the gist of where I've been.
Okay, well, thank you. Gary, would you like to begin?
Thank you. Welcome, Jack. And
Gary?
thanks for putting your hat in the ring.
Hey.
And I have a question that involves South Hingham, and the question is, how would you balance commercial development, whether it be retail or commercial development, with the protection of and the character of the residential neighborhoods that both surround that area and also the rest of the residential areas in the town?
Yeah, it's a tough question. Architecture, as you know, is all, it's perceived. Each one of us would have a different view on, what is good quality architecture, what fits, what doesn't fit. So there's no really right reason, wrong reason why one would say that. So I don't know if that's an answer, but that would be the answer I would give. I mean, you could take a poll of everybody on the board, and you'd have a different view on what's acceptable and what isn't.
What areas involved, let's say, in commercial development, would you say might have an impact or an intervention into the neighborhoods?
Well, I have an agenda, as we all do. I think it's to improve the quality of housing for our senior citizens, okay, and young couples that want to come in. I've got 2 sons, and they couldn't afford. They can't afford to come to this town. They really can't. And we have senior citizens on the other side who are holding on to their homes, 4 and 5 bedroom homes. And I think there are solutions. I know there are solutions to that. And I have solutions for that. So those are the things that are important to me, is how we help those 2 select groups of people. I think, I don't know, helps you, but...
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Jack, good to see you again.
Nice seeing you, Rich.
My question is, how would you balance the rules of our permitting process with residents who make a convincing case that there should be an exception to those rules?
That's why we have the ZBA, I guess. That's one of the reasons, if that's an answer. But, there are exceptions to every rule. And to say one rule is right or wrong, I'm not sure. If you could repeat the question again.
How would you balance the rules of our permitting process with residents who make a convincing case or object to those rules, that there should be an exception during the permitting process?
Should there, is the question, should there be? Or,
yes.
I think every case stands on its own merits. I really do. Again, going back to my specific, what my agenda is, I think I would like to see, a little more 2 families, say in 2 families. I think there should be some provision for in-law apartments, for instance. So that would help both what I'm talking about. You have an older family who's holding on to a home. You have a son who, 25, 30-year-old, who wants to come in. The mother can't take care of the house. There's too much taxes on the house, so you create a special zone or a ZBA, special permit, if you will, for that to happen. And I don't know if we've addressed that, but, in-law, there's so many things that you can solve with that. You get a built-in babysitter, I guess. You get a situation where the folks, the kids are now paying part of the taxes, the tax burden. They're paying part of the upkeep on the house. The parent, if it was, has the ability to have his own privacy or her privacy. There's just so many things that mix, that one change to some of our zoning, our ZBA, or our planning process helps. That's kind of, I go on and on and on, but, by just that, by allowing that to come through and by special permit, maybe it's hooked into age or what have you, I think it might help us on our balance of housing that we're obviously short on.
Hi, thank you for your patience tonight. My question's a little bit less about the particulars of the planning board's work and more about how you work on committees or boards. The 5 of us have to come to agreements together, and often there are a lot of people in the room with conflicting points of view, and I'm just wondering what strengths you bring to a board or committee situation.
Good question. I did serve on the CCMC. I was appointed to the board. And I believe out of all the committees, except the first one, we were probably the most productive and the most...
I'm sorry, which committee?
CCMC, Country Club.
Oh, the Country Club, sorry.
And it was at a time when we had a contractor who was, to say the least, it was just a lawsuit waiting to happen. So we essentially waited him out, and we brought on our own people, Jay, who we all know, and it's been a success ever since. And a new restaurant, the pool, which, by the way, is a loser, and we definitely should talk about that at some point. But yeah, the committee, we dug in with Ted helping us out on the financing side for the three and a half years, and I ran against this gentleman and lost for planning board. But that was my first working with committees and understanding that, you know, it's a compromise. I mean, you got to get in the room and you got to hash it out and make it happen. And I think everybody brings something to the table. I think that's the key.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for putting your name forward for consideration. Judy asked a question about how what skills you would bring to complement the board. My question is a little bit related, and that is, how does where you live in Hingham and where you work, how would that shape and help contribute to the planning board?
A couple of ways. I've lived in the town some 43 years. I've seen some huge changes in it. And again, not to go back to but our senior citizens, they are so important to the fabric of our community. And we're losing them all. And I don't mean putting them in a nursing home or sticking them in a gated community. That's not what they want. They want to stay in the homes. We've got to find a way that we can keep them here. Because I know my two sons, as you know, they shoveled their walks. The neighbors had their stories. They got so much from having older neighbors, and that to me, and that's what I saw, and that's why I put my hat in the ring to see if I can't help that and help those younger families that we're not, we've got a lot of transients coming through, and with GE, that's going to create some problems. I mean, you're going to have 60, 80,000 people, and they're going to find Hingham. And our property values are going to go sky high in the next 5 to 10 years. And we better be ready for it. And what's going to happen? We're going to get another batch of new families coming in, and they're going to be well-heeled, and they're going to be able to afford a lot more for our homes and push out our neighbors, That's what I see, and that's what I think we should be prepared for, or at least think about, coming up.
Thank you.
Jack, my question's timely in light of your answer in your earlier one. The planning board introduces changes to the zoning bylaw at town meeting, as you know. Where do you see the strengths and weaknesses of our existing zoning bylaw, and what changes or proposals would you make to address that?
There's no simple answer. It's an ongoing process. It changes as evolution does. It's meant to be changed. There is no cast in stone in any bylaw, any ZBA, any permitting process. You've got to be ready, and you've got to handle it every case, like we say. So there is no set pattern why we should change it up. I noticed that we have some coming up. I don't understand some of them. I have to kind of brief myself on them. I don't know if that answers your question, but they do change, and they should change. I mean, that's good.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Hey, Jack. Welcome.
Yes, sir.
In terms of decisions that have been made by the board in the past, does any come to mind that you may have voted differently on, and how may you?
Not being in on the and getting in deep into all these, we bring these people on, and we got to accept they're our fellow citizens. They're there, they're spending their free time, there is no, I can't say I would. There was nothing, Derby Street, the shipyard, I don't particularly like the architecture down there. Doesn't work for me, but that's a personal thing. I'd like to see more industrial base. I'd like to see us try to get more industrial base here, business base. I think banks, we got banks all over the place. Well, in my realm, banks are going to be dinosaurs. They really are. Everything's going to be done on a computer, and they're going to be passé in the next 5-10 years. So if your son and daughters are going to be bankers, be prepared to, support them in the near future.
Keep the bedroom open.
Keep that in mind, thanks.
You're welcome.
I have a quick question and then a little longer one. Are you willing to run for the election in May, for this position?
It's a good question. I thought about that sitting here, and I got to be honest, if I feel I can help and I can feel I'm contributing over the next couple of months, I think that'll tell me if I should run or not. And it's an honest answer. I can't tell you one way or the other right now. I am, but as Rich knows, I'm a service-disabled, veteran-owned company, which I think, I hire a lot of veterans, which in my business, which means a lot to me. And that's another kind of quirk that I have, housing for our vets. We do have it in town, and I tell you, I applaud us for doing it. I'd like to see more. But yeah, it's...
Is there any question that you wish we had asked you?
Excuse me?
Is there any question that you wish we had asked tonight?
No, there really isn't. I mean, you can't, obviously we can't ask every question, and I can't answer every question, but, it's, I appreciate the opportunity, I guess,
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Hello. Hi. I think I'm last.
Last but not least. Good evening. Welcome, and thank you for putting your name up for consideration. What we're doing is we're asking a series of questions that each of us has asked the other three residents that have applied for this position before you. Before we get into that, if you could just briefly give us a little background about yourself and why you have decided to step forward for consideration to the planning board.
Okay. So I'm Jen Gay Smith, as you must already know. I've lived in Hingham with my husband for 11 years now. We live in Bradley Park. My professional background is as an attorney, a real estate attorney for 2 big law firms in Boston, where I did some commercial work, but primarily residential real estate work, working with individuals for pretty much all of their real estate needs, from leasing to acquiring property, selling, zoning, anything really, from building a dock to selling a house, buying a house, and including planning, land planning, conservation restrictions, and other work like that. I also worked with towns sometimes. We represented a few towns at one of my firms, and I worked with them with their zoning bylaws and with matters that were presented to them and determining, whether things were in compliance or not. So I have a very strong, almost 10 years, 9 years of real estate law, and about 5 years ago I retired to stay home with my children. We have 3 children, and I've been staying home with them for the past few years.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll begin. Gary.
Again, thank you for coming in and your patience waiting for the later part. My question involves development in South Hingham, and I'd like to ask you what your feelings are about that development relative to how do we protect the integrity and the character of the neighborhoods that both surround that development, but also the rest of the neighborhoods in Hingham.
So I think that the development in South Hingham, like everything else in town, needs to be balanced. Obviously, geographically, it's located on Route 3, which is our access to customers for retail, employees for jobs. So in a lot of ways, it's our primary, there's really only a couple of corridors in town, right, where you can build successful commercial or retail or office real estate. So I understand that the town has a need to grow the tax base, and commercial is the way to do that. I think like anything else, it's a balance. It's balancing the need for tax revenue, the character of the town, and the residential neighborhoods that are, in some instances, really nested right in those areas. You know, I don't come to this with strong opinions in terms of a direction that the town should go, or, you know, looking back and judging how things have been done. I think that, like anything else, like I said, it requires balancing. I mean, one of the most amazing things about this town is its character, but the other side of the coin is the need to grow and the desire for revenue, and the need for revenue, I should say. So I don't have an answer or a program or a plan in my head, but I understand some of the underlying issues and can see how they've been dealt with and have thoughts on how they could be dealt with.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm
Good.
well, thank you.
You mentioned balancing the equities of an application, so my question is going to be follow-up on your comments. And that is, how would you balance the rules of our permitting process with residents who make a convincing case that there should be an exception to those rules?
So I think that everything has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, but in a context, right? I think that you can think easily of examples where people want an exception to the rule and it totally makes sense. And you can think of other examples where it doesn't make sense. And I think that there's a balance, but there's also a greater good, and that's why there's a board that has to be able, the ones that look at the big picture. And sometimes exceptions to the rule make perfect sense and everyone agrees, and sometimes they don't. And I don't think that it's such a lawyer answer, but there's not a, you know, everything happens in a context, and depending on situations, I think you need to look at the rules, understand how they apply, meet as a group, and hash it out. And I think that there aren't always perfect answers, but at the end of the day, you apply the rules and try to think of why the rules are there and go from there.
So we do. Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for coming, and thanks for your patience. My question's a little bit less about zoning and the planning board, and more about just individually group behavior. We're a board of 5,
Okay.
and we work closely together to come to a decision, often with conflicting points of view. And I'm just thinking about you as a committee member, and maybe you can think about committees or boards you've been on in the past. Kind of what skills or traits do you bring to the party?
Well, I grew up in a family with 5 kids, so from the beginning I had to learn to get along and play nice. But professionally, I served on the Women's Bar Foundation, which is a group of 25 lawyers sitting around the table, and they do tons and tons of pro bono work. And as you can imagine, there were disagreeing opinions in terms of programming and direction and all of the facets of running a big foundation with 25 women attorneys would be. And in that group of women, I rose to the top. I was secretary for a long time and then vice president because I showed an ability to get along with others, willingness to work hard and get things done. And I think that that's what I would bring to this group. I mean, I'm very interested in serving. I feel as though I have the skill set that would allow me to jump in quickly, especially where this is a vacancy that needs to be filled. And I have plenty to learn, but I also think I have a head start in terms of my background and my knowledge. So I think that, to answer your question, I think I'm known to be a good team player and a hard worker. And I usually enjoy being around other people and can find a way to get along and get to an agreement. I mean, I'm a consensus builder by nature.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jen. My question is similar to a little bit similar to Judy's in that you mentioned that you lived in Bradley Woods. How do you think that where you live in Hingham might shape or help you contribute to this board?
So I actually live in Bradley Park. It's so confusing.
I get them.
No, that's okay. Everybody does.
Good, I'm not on the planning board. I get them confused all the time.
So I think that we're all human, right? And we all live where we live, and it's becomes, after a while, a little part of your identity. So I think that to say that it wouldn't affect you may not be entirely truthful, because when something shows up and it's in your backyard, suddenly you're not thinking as rationally maybe as you would be if it were across town. But again, I think that's where the board, the fact that it's a board of 5 people becomes important. I think that you need to, as I think I do, have the ability to see both sides of an issue. And I think you need to understand the greater good for the town and act accordingly. I mean, I think we all have the parts of town maybe that are our favorite or desires for particular areas of town, but that's why it's not one person, right, that runs the planning board. It's a group. And as a group, we would need to make the best decision, putting aside, just to the extent that we can, our personal preferences.
Thank you.
One of the things that the planning board does is advance changes to the zoning bylaw at the town meetings. What do you perceive to be the strengths and weaknesses of the existing zoning bylaw, and what would you propose to change that?
I don't come to the table with my ideas on how to change the zoning bylaw. I suspect that it has a lot of strengths and weaknesses. I am not familiar specifically with those, the strengths and the weaknesses. I think that from a policy perspective, I mean, the thing that jumps out to me, and it's not within the zoning bylaw, but is the 40Bs and the ability to go around some of the zoning because of our, the amount of affordable housing that we have in town. But that's obviously not something that's within the zoning bylaw that could be changed. I think that I would take the time to learn and understand and become a lot more familiar with our zoning bylaw. I have read through parts of it from time to time and seen how it's applied in town, but I don't really come to the table with an agenda or an idea of what already needs to be improved or strengthened.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
Quick question. In terms of the decisions the board has made in the past, is there any one that maybe sticks out, or if you followed any of it that you may have thought differently about or voted differently?
No, I can't think of a specific example. I mean, just because of my background and my curious nature, I've certainly read plenty of planning board minutes over time, and of course I read the Hingham Journal, but I can't think of something that I think was off base or, something that I would have necessarily gone in another direction on.
Well, I'll tell you this, that our board must be doing a fantastic job, because that was a pretty uniform answer.
Smart answer.
Exactly. I have a quick question and then another question after. Are you willing to run for the seat if you're appointed to this position in May?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And then are there any questions you wish we had asked, or a question you wish we had asked you?
So, yes, there's one question, and I actually think you did ask it, and I didn't answer it. You asked me to give you my background and then why I'm interested in being on the planning board, and I didn't answer the second part. So, it's not really a yes, it's a no, but can I answer the question that I didn't answer earlier? So I have lived in Hingham for 11 years, and I am lucky to be situated now in a way that I have some time to give back to this town that I love. And I have been inspired in the past few years by meeting more and more people that are involved in the town, and I have a great admiration for the work that you all do and that my dear friends do for this town. And when I saw this opportunity arise, I thought, this is perfect, this is for me. I mean, this is right in my wheelhouse in terms of my professional background, and I have the time and the ability and the desire to serve my town at this point. And I think that one of the things that I think probably everyone in town loves is the character of this town, and planning board is one of the ways that I could use my talents to give something back to a town that has given me so much and my family so much. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, well, thank you so
Thanks
much
for coming in.
yeah, good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So everybody come back.
I guess at this point, the preliminary question is, do we as a group feel ready to take the vote tonight?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Since it's your seat, your
Okay.
board,
All right, I'll start. First of all, you know, there are a lot of reasons that I love this town, but I sure am proud of this town for having 4 incredible candidates come in front of us. I mean, it's just an impressive situation that we're in, where we have an opening and 4 qualified, intelligent, thoughtful, and caring citizens come forth to give their time, which we know is, you know, quite extensive. So I was really, really impressed with our candidates. And I think for me, the candidate who stood out particularly because of her experience was Jennifer Gay-Smith. I think she brings an expertise to the board that, at least for me, I've missed since Susan has been absent, Susan Murphy. And I liked her energy, and I liked her thoughtful answers. And I mean, they all had thoughtful answers. So that's where I stand.
Gary?
I share Sarah's pleasure in that we had 4 really good candidates, and I'm really thrilled that, you know, sometimes one hears that we don't have enough people who are running or enough people who are interested in the civic positions in the town and wanting to give something back, and I was really thrilled that we had 4 candidates. Initially, I was worried. I thought we only had 1, maybe 2, and so that's great. I'm also really thrilled with the expertise that everybody brings and the passion that everybody brought to the board. I agree with Sarah. I think Jen is my candidate, who I would vote for, because what I like is her team building, and I like the passion, and I like the fact that she'd like to work without an agenda coming in. She's objective, and I think that her expertise could bring a lot to the land use issues that are really, a lot of difficult land use issues are coming up in front of the planning board, both going into this town meeting and in the next few years to come, and I think she would bring a lot to that discussion.
Well, my thoughts are each one of the candidates, and I agree with my colleagues, are very qualified. Each one of them has a skill set that will be beneficial to the board. Jack Gamache, an architect, very passionate about the well-being of the town, impressed me. Mr. Frazier, you know, an expert in traffic issues, can be very helpful to the board as well at this point. The skill set we need the most right now, in my opinion, is would be possessed by Mr. Blakey and Jennifer Gay-Smith. So you have 2 very well-accomplished, excellent attorneys. We just lost an attorney, and we lost an attorney who was a wonderful board member and had practical experience appearing before boards, and that's what Jennifer Gay-Smith has right now. So I would agree with Gary and Sarah. My vote tonight would be for her.
Thank you for asking. I also commend everyone who put their hat in the ring and are willing to volunteer for the town. I also made a list of the recommendations and suggestions that they made tonight, because I think there are a number of them that we should be following up on, and I think you know which ones I mean. So I hope those names, all 3 names, go into our talent bank, and we bring them, these people back in some capacity to help the town. I agree with my colleagues that Jen Gay-Smith would be the best fit for our board at this time.
Mary?
I would support Jen Gay-Smith for all the reasons that everyone mentioned, as well with gratitude for everyone who's putting their name forward.
Thank you. You know, I think I feel like I'm a broken record sometimes with some of these folks that come before us when we interview, and it never ceases to amaze me, the talent that we have. And I know Sarah was talking about, it just blows me away how lucky we are to have these people it makes decisions tough. And I know in the past I've said, geez, I'm not even sure I can make the decision, but I did kind of narrow it down to James Blakey and Jennifer Gay Smith. And you know, I want to be, may not matter anyway, but I can count. I was very impressed with Mr. Blakey, though. I'll tell you, I really, really would hate to lose a guy like that. I'm not sure where you find a guy like that in volunteering for a board, but I'm certainly respectful of the planning boards because you folks are the folks that are filling the spot. So, I would defer to you guys on that.
Thank you.
I join Mr. Gannon on that. I think that the kind of firepower that he would bring would be considerable. But having said that, I nominated Gary Tondorf Dick to the planning board and William Ramsey to the planning board, and they're still here. So it's your board, folks. You want Jennifer Gay Smith, she's going to be a great addition. I'm ready for the nomination.
I make a motion that the planning board vote, planning board in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen vote to nominate Jennifer Gay Smith to start off the term of Walter Sullivan.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye.
I think we have to do a poll. I think
Okay.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay,
And the other-
welcome, Jennifer.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to add is I think it is wonderful now to have these other names in the pipeline. I think it's going to be a great asset to Hingham, so I think we'll be seeing these faces hopefully in the future in all sorts of areas. So we are a fortunate town, so thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much
Have
for
a good
coming in.
night.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Boyd. I apologize.
Actually, discussion here.
Okay, next matter on the agenda is Town Administrator Bylaw Committee. Do we have anybody here from the Town Administrator Bylaw Committee? Very good.
It's going to bring you back.
Okay. Do you have anybody here from the Town Administrator Bylaw Committee?
Karen.
Tom, right?
Oh,
They're outside, I think.
okay.
We've got the fire station building committee here.
Yeah.
They were right next door, Ted.
Wow. Walking in cement shoes tonight.
I like the tie, though.
Thank you.
They're coming next door.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the Town Administrator Bylaw Committee is going to be joining us momentarily. And here they are. Gentlemen, would you join us at the table? Please. Argue who sits where. All right, well, is somebody going to come up?
We've lost Karen.
This is a cooperative group, no one wants to take credit?
That explains it.
I was here on time, I was just late for this segment.
I apologize, we're a little
No
off,
worries, no worries.
but we'll catch up.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, I'm Karen Johnson, 16 Berkeley Circle for the TA Bylaw Committee. I'm here with my esteemed colleagues, Nelson Ross, Tom Carey, David Pace, and Charlie Cristello. As you know, our committee was constituted in 2013 to review and make recommendations with respect to executive governance and best practices in the administration of town government. We come before you tonight in response to your charge to us from last November to provide you with a draft of a special act describing and defining the role of the town administrator so that you, in turn, could consider the advisability of a warrant article posing the question of a special act to town meeting. Tonight's question is procedural. It's whether this particular issue of local governance ought to be discussed in greater detail by you all, the advisory committee, the public, and ultimately 2016 town meeting. I want to be clear that the vote before you tonight is not a vote on the content or merits of the special act itself. So, if you'll allow me some food for thought on the advisability point. I'll be candid. At the start of the special act phase of our work, I was a little ambivalent. I thought, we have a bylaw, why isn't that good enough? If I'm being really candid, I think that Nelson worked us so hard during the bylaw phase that I was a little afraid of what the special act phase would bring. The first step in the special act process was to go back to the report that we presented to you describing our work in researching and drafting the bylaw and see where we left off. At the end of that report, the committee noted that were it not for the limitations imposed by the strictures of state law on the town's ability to act solely by local bylaw, the committee would have recommended a much stronger bylaw. After noting that most all of our peer towns and other AAA credits have adopted either special acts or charters codifying the role of the town administrator or town manager, our report goes on to state that by drafting a special act dealing with the authority of the town administrator, Hingham likewise could do more to improve its management, attract the best managerial talent, and protect its AAA rating. The proposed bylaw that we proposed to you last year does not resolve these broader managerial issues, and our town may wish to consider the advisability of a special act in the future. Similarly, the advisory committee comment to town meeting stated, state statute restricts further delegation of administrative responsibilities. Most AAA-rated communities in the Commonwealth have adopted either a special act or a charter to solidify professional administration. The town may want to consider the advisability of a special act in the future. After reviewing these materials, I was reminded that our job was not finished and that the future is now. We then set out to see if a special act would allay the identified concerns, namely, the ability of the town to have access to and be able to hire the best possible candidate for the role of town administrator, and the preservation of the town's credit rating. On the hiring front, we heard from Tom Grew, a Massachusetts Municipal Association and local government consultant, that even with a bylaw, Hingham would be at a disadvantage in the hiring market to attract top talent without a special act. This notion has been seconded by Charlie Costello and has been experienced firsthand by Nelson Ross. We also explored the effect of a special act on our AAA credit rating. We spoke with Richard Tortora, financial advisor to the town. Mr. Tortora said that over the last 18 months or so, the credit rating agencies have shifted their focus in the evaluation of a municipal credit away from wealth-driven factors, instead placing more emphasis on a stable and sophisticated financial management team. A move by the town to further institutionalize its financial administration would be seen as a credit positive move. Conversely, changes in management that might signal instability in town management and administration could be viewed negatively by the rating agencies. This discussion with Mr. Tortora resonated with me. I was on the advisory committee in 2008 and thereafter. Along with the Board of Selectmen, we worked hard to remove the credit watch that had been placed on the town by certain of the rating agencies, and we started the long slog to dig out from under the financial crisis. We did this, unfortunately, by saying no, and by asking people to do more, in some cases much more, with less. Most of those folks were our town employees. It was not an easy period of time, but without the stamina and willingness of our workforce to dig deep, we would not be where we are today. As a result of that experience, I'm mindful of any decision that may call into question our financial stability and our credit rating. Finally, we did what every good committee does. We benchmarked. We looked at our 19 comparator towns to get a sense of best practices and common practices with respect to administrative structures of local governments. With very recent changes in Milton and Wellesley, and factoring out communities that have mayors, I think the statistic is that 16 out of 17 of our comparator communities have either a special act or a charter codifying the role of the town administrator or town manager. This was all perhaps much more than you needed or you wanted, but it represents the work of the committee to date. I'm not sure if my colleagues have anything to offer, but I'm sure we'd be happy to take questions.
All right, well, I want to thank you, all of you, for the hard work you've done on this. I know it's a work in progress that's measured in years. My colleagues, questions?
It looks as if in reading the proposed warrant article that this is very similar to the TA bylaw that town meeting adopted.
Yeah, Nelson, you want to comment on that?
I think with very, very limited exceptions, that's absolutely right. We've really taken the local bylaw and essentially put it into a special act with a few, what I would regard as minor changes.
Thank you.
And Mary, just to add on to that, you might remember from our discussions last year, the committee views the local bylaw as really the codification of 25 years of evolved administrative practice in town. So there's no secret sauce here. We were trying to write down how it is Hingham operates, and we would recommend very few changes to that going forward.
Thank you.
I want to once again thank the committee for their work. I may not always agree where we were going on some of these issues, but I am always appreciative of the time and the effort you folks put in. And Karen, you especially, to take the time to speak to me about some of the issues.
Sure.
So one of my thoughts is, I think it's a positive thing in one respect. Looking ahead, obviously, I know we've talked to a number of members over time about we always want to improve our status in terms of management and so forth, and attract people that are qualified, and it makes perfect sense to me. I will tell you, I was surprised, and still am surprised, that we moved so quickly from the bylaw, which we talked about, last year, and without what I thought, not really giving it a chance to see whether it worked. All of a sudden, we were talking about codifying with a special act. It caught me off guard. I did not, and I think I told Karen that, I did not expect to come back and to have this kind of discussion, and I may have expressed that in the fall when we first started talking about it. But I'm not averse to talking about it. I'm just I was under the impression that we had this bylaw, that it was going to make things kind of simple, and it was all spelled out, and we had basically something that made it clearer and easier for us all to kind of follow. Okay. And it may or may not have done that. It all sometimes depends on individuals and their own behavior. But in terms of concept, it seemed that it was going to work, and I was on board with that, and that's what I voted for, and I know town meeting voted for it. So having said that, if we have pretty much the same, language, criteria, with some minor changes, why do we need a special act if the average person, after listening to what we have to say, is going to say we kind of have the same thing? And so is a credit agency going to say, just because you took that extra step to get a special act, that somehow makes us more creditworthy or secure? I don't understand that, so I'm asking someone just to explain that to me.
Well, Tom Carey is probably the guy to really explain it, but my understanding from Tom Carey has been that under a local bylaw, right, the role and responsibility of the town administrator is wholly dependent upon delegation by the Board of Selectmen. Mm-hmm. So there's no inherent authority in the town administrator. So I think you're right that a local bylaw can solve kind of the internal town problems, because you all can decide, as between the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator, here's how things are going to look and here's how things are going to work. What the special act does is allows town meeting, I think, to say, here's how we want our local government to look on a going forward basis. And that look would not be dependent on discretionary delegation by the Board of Selectmen. this would be the role of the town administrator. And that, and I'll give it to you in 1 second, and that, I think, is where, maybe it's an internal, external view. I think that's where parties external to the town are looking to say, how stable is your management? And I can see how stable your management is, because I know this isn't going anywhere. It's, it's written down, this is how it's going to be. It's not subject to delegation. So candidates coming in and looking at how the town's run and what the parameters of the town administrator job would have certainty, right? And the credit rating agencies likewise would have that certainty.
I come at this, Paul, from a little different perspective. I did sit through the screening process for town administrator after Charlie left, and I met with Tom Grew, our consultant, and Tom said to me, "You're not going to get good candidates. This is not an attractive place for a highly qualified person to work." And I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. You've probably heard me say this before. This is a place where somebody coming into that position will not know whether, with a change in the Board of Selectmen, he or she is going to have the same authority, same role. And he said, without a special act or without a charter, you will not attract good candidates, and we didn't. And he came before our committee when we were considering the local bylaw and repeated it. And so my concern is, Hingham is not going to be an attractive town for town administrator candidates. And he said to us at that time, there's tremendous competition now for the highly qualified people who have the financial background and all of the, it's a very diverse job. It requires a lot of talents in a lot of different areas. And Hingham is I don't want to see Hingham in that position ever again. It was bad, frankly. So that's where I come from.
And I would say, thank you, Karen. And I would say I come at it from a little different perspective. As cognizant as I am of what the future requires for us, I'm also concerned about the present. And I say that in the respect that as an elected official, I've probably said this many times, I view it as a privilege to be elected in this town. I view it as a privilege to have the trust of people in town to be able to make decisions such as what the town bylaw affords. I don't think that's a negative. I don't think that indicates uncertainty or instability in our management. I think it's a safeguard. And I will clearly say, even though I've only been here a short time, I don't think that there is a lack of inherent authority in the town administrator. I have spoken to Ted in a generic term. There are clearly defined areas where, and there should be, by the way, our town administrator is in a position of authority in terms of his role. And we have our role. And so, I mean, I respectfully I disagree that where we're going with this thing in the long term, which I agree with, by the way, that we should always improve our standing, is going to serve us in the short term. I don't see a difference in the bylaw requiring, in terms of language, first of all, in terms of effect, requiring us to get a special act. I envision this to be a discussion that would take place over a little longer period of time for the future. This seems like we're moving quickly on this thing, quicker than I ever envisioned, to solidify some type of authority in the present. And I will say this because it is true. I am very concerned about solidifying authority in that position in the present. So we all come at this from different perspectives. I probably could never have support this warrant article if it comes to be, based on my personal experience.
I work a full-time job, and I thought long and hard before I stood for being a selectman. I was assured by the men and women who sat in this seat before me that it can be done, that the town administrator and the assistant town administrator and the staff in this building are well-equipped to assist any selectman who sits here discharging their duties. I thought, frankly, there was a slight earthquake here in the fall of 2013, which got this whole process generated, because I think that there was a genuine concern that there was a real threat to the effective management and government in this office. And we as a board agreed that the town administrator position had to be examined. We commissioned some very experienced people who have a combined experience in town service of over a century to address it with direct experience in the last hiring process, and this is what they found. I don't think this is rushed. I think this has been very deliberate. I think it's been incremental. I think it's needed. I'm prepared to support it and speak to it because, you know, frankly, I think the town wants to elect citizen selectmen. But you work full-time, I work full-time, Mary works full-time. We need good people, and the people that take our place are going to need good people. I'm not going to personalize this. I think that this is a position that needs to be strengthened and maintained going forward if we're going to maintain the kind of good, strong government that we take pride in. So that's where I am on it. I'm ready to take that next step.
I would just add two things. My sense last year is that this is where your committee would have gone if you had a different charge. So
That's correct.
I think that's important to note. I would also just say that, you know, Karen mentioned at the outset this is procedural. I think what you see on this board are valid opinions that are reflective of our community. All very good points that are made, an important conversation to have. Our vote tonight, all it's going to do is open that conversation up to town meeting. And I think we owe town meeting the chance to have that conversation and to, you know, further talk about the very good points that were made here. So I think the question in front of us is a vote to insert this into the warrant for consideration by the 2016 town meeting, and I would support that procedural vote.
Just the last thing. Mary, you made some very fair points, and I don't disagree with what you're saying at all in terms of what we probably, where they would have went with this, and that's important to understand. I get that. I thought we were addressing that issue, because I felt several earthquakes over the last year and a half that I've been in here, several earthquakes, and that concerned me. But the bottom line is, I thought when we did this bylaw committee process last year, that we were addressing it. And I know that the committee would have advocated for something more. But I really wanted to see it. I know it's only procedural, but we should talk about it. And I really wanted to see if this bylaw article that we just passed was going to work and give us some time. And I was prepared to address it, and I guess if the vote goes the way in favor, then we will address it. I wholeheartedly want town meeting to address every issue that's of importance. But I just wanted to make sure that my opinion was voiced, that's all.
Sure.
Well, then, let's take a vote, the procedural vote, to move this thing forward.
I'll make a motion to advance the Town Administrator Bylaw Special Act for consideration by the 2016 Annual Town Meeting.
Second? I'll second that. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
I'd like to
Thank you
thank you,
very
lady and
much.
gentlemen, so much for all the hard work you've
Thank you.
done on this.
So we get to come back, too, right?
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we're a little behind, and I apologize to those of you who showed up on time. And at this point in time, we're going to speak to the Fire Station Building Committee and invite them to step up to the table. Join us. And then we'll do one. Greg, would you be kind enough to introduce the committee members as part of this?
Yes, sir. So, first of all, I'm Greg McCune, 20 Stagecoach Road, Chairman of the Fire Station Building Committee. With me tonight are members of the committee, Tom Carey, Nancy McDonald, coming up is Al Kearney, Karen Griswold, and of course Chief Olson is on the committee as well. We actually had a seventh member, Peter Boyle, but last month Peter moved from town, and so I expect to see his resignation soon. So we are going to be looking for a replacement candidate. We've actually identified a couple of folks, and we'll probably talk to Ted and see what makes sense about moving forward with that soon. So I assume you'd like us to give you a little bit of an update of what we've been doing over the last few months?
If you would, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just a little background, I think it was Article 14 of the 2015 annual town meeting established the committee, and we came together over the summer. There were, I think, 3 moderator appointments, 4 selectmen appointments. We had our first meeting either in late July, early August. And the process we undertook was, first thing we did was hire a owner's project manager, and we hired the team at KBA, which is the same team that worked on the middle school. They obviously are very familiar with the town. It was a proposal process. I think we interviewed 6 or 7 people who responded to our RFP, but we felt that KBA not only put together a very compelling and competitive package, but also, given their experience with the town, and I think everybody would agree, a very favorable experience with the middle school project, that we were very comfortable moving forward with them. The next step was to engage a architecture firm to start the design process. The Fire Asset Committee had been working with Dorr and Whittier as part of their process, and we had an option to engage them as our design consultant for the design and engineering stage of the project. So we exercised that option, so they're on board, and over the past 3 or 4 months, they've been working pretty diligently, putting together a number of different plans. We actually had our initial plan, I think we put together in October, and the initial plan was essentially a renovation of the existing station, centered on the apparatus bay, which, for those who don't know, that's essentially the garage component of the fire station. And I'm going to oversimplify it, but essentially the plan was to leave that more or less intact, and then significantly renovate and remodel the 2 sides of the building on either side. And that's where all the, what we call the program areas are. It's where the firefighters live, eat, while they're at the station, but it also is where all the equipment is stored, where they hold training. So, and essentially, those buildings are over 70 years old. The nature of firefighting and emergency response has evolved quite a bit over that time, and so the needs of the fire department in that space have changed, such that there was a significant amount of renovation and remodeling that was needed. As we went through that process, we started to come across a few stumbling blocks. I think the first significant one we came across was that the soils underneath the fire station were not up to the current seismic standards. So since 1941, when the stations were first built, the laws around what type of a seismic event the public building needs to withstand have changed significantly in the type of soil, and of course I'm not an expert, so I can't speak to the specifics of it, but were such that there was going to be significant reinforcement that was going to be needed to undergo any kind of renovation of the site. And that was going to obviously add to the price of the project. So that was the first stumbling block we came across. But we continued to work forward because even with the incremental price increase, we still felt that the location at 230 North Street was a good location, particularly with respect to the response time to service that part of town. But as we continued our discussions, we realized that not only do we need to renovate and remodel the parts of the station on either side of the apparatus bay, but also the apparatus bay itself was really wholly inadequate. I think the exact dimensions of it now are 35 by 60 is the current bay, and it's a two-car, two vehicle garage. I think the current standard that these buildings are being designed to is a 40 by 80 bay for two apparatus. And so when we looked at that, and we looked at what we were looking at for a cost, decided that to leave the existing bay in place didn't make sense, because we would spend a significant amount of money, and while we would have a nice facility, certainly better than what we have now, it really wouldn't meet the needs of the fire department today. They could operate, certainly. They're operating currently, and they're doing a great job, but it wouldn't be really what they need, and as important, it wouldn't give us the flexibility going forward. I mean, I think we all agree that this is really a 50-year building. That what we're going to build over the course the next couple of years has to be something that will be serviceable for the next 50 years. And so we didn't want to go into this process or, on day one, say, wow, I wish we had done this, or I wish we had done that. So we wanted to make sure that we considered everything that we wanted, what we needed, what the building should be like. And so as we went through that process and realized that we needed a larger bay facility, it really caused us to revisit the overall design of the structure, such that this concept of having a central bay with two program space and habitability space on either side really wasn't going to make sense. And instead, what we would need to do is have the bays on one side of the property with the program areas on the other side. And in order to do that, we would have to tear down the entire building. We'll get to that in a second. So, but we did take a look. The architects put together a design, and I think you have a slide. If you remember what page it is, Kevin? Yeah. Right. So Ted's gonna, I think, get that on.
Oh, all right.
So that's sort of a schematic of the floor plan, and the gray area off to your right is what the apparatus bay would look like. So that's where the fire engine and the ambulance would be. And then the program spaces, which includes the dorms, the office space, training space, equipment storage, et cetera, would be in those colored blocks off to the side. Again, that's radically different than what's on the site now. In addition, in order to have the square footage we would need, anybody who's been down by the site knows that the building takes up almost the entire piece of property. This would literally take up the entire piece of property. We would almost be touching buildings on either side. So we're already outside of setback requirements, et cetera. This would be even of a situation.
Is that open space down there?
That I don't know the answer to.
We're non-conforming in several respects of zoning already.
Yep.
Right.
With sideline setbacks
Sure.
and everything. And we would be virtually whatever category of the zoning law would put it in.
Yep.
The 1941, as you know, Paul, with zoning being in its infancy.
One page.
We could build things on lots that we would never permit today, and all of our stations are basically on such lots, at least the two north and south are on that kind of lot.
So that's the floor plan. If you turn over, there's actually a picture, a rendering of what, and this is just one concept that the architects came up with. It isn't something that's necessarily carved in stone, but again, we would have had to tear down the existing structure and build something new, and this is one of the ideas that they came up with. So a couple issues that we have, and actually tonight, earlier this evening, we presented this to the Historical District Commission. Needless to say, they were not excited about the prospect of tearing that building down, nor were they excited about the prospect of that building replacing it. Nor did we expect them to be. But we thought it was important to meet with them, show them this, in part to get their feedback, but also to help socialize to the town some of the concerns that we have and some of the limitations that we have with the existing site. I think, that fire station has been there as long as I can remember. I've been there since the 40s. People are used to it. People expect it to be there. I know it's important to people who live on that side of town. But the reality is to build a 21st century fire emergency response facility on that site really doesn't make a lot of sense. And so before I jump ahead, I just want to ask if there's anybody else on the committee, if I left anything out or there's anything else we wanted to go into.
I think that's a unanimous conclusion.
And at the Historical District Commission, while they certainly didn't dismiss it out of hand, I think they were quite polite to us, but they certainly had reservations, and there were some members of the public there that were very concerned about the prospect of tearing down the existing building and putting something up. But there did seem to be some, or not some, but there did seem to be interest in the idea of looking for another site that would be able to serve the north side of town. And I think that's where we're at now, is, should we consider other sites? I think it's important to say it would not be impossible to build something or to go forward with the original plan of an extended renovation of North Street, but I think the problem there is we would spend somewhere between $4 and $6 million, and we would end up with something that no one would be happy with. And I don't think that's an outcome that anybody's interested in. So the conundrum we're in, though, right now is our charge was to build a fire station at 230 North Street. We don't have the authority to evaluate or consider other locales. So we have actually voted and planned to submit to the Selectmen a warrant article, which I think you have a copy of. We actually made a slight change to it, which really more just grammatical than anything, where that would essentially broaden the scope to allow us to take a look at some other sites and hopefully address some of the concerns that have arisen as we've looked at the 230 North Street site. Excuse me. So again, that's where we're at today. I will say I think we're all disappointed that we were hoping that we came to you today that we would actually have which we do actually have a warrant article to build a fire station. That was Plan B, which we never thought would go forward, and in fact we did not vote to move that article forward because we just don't feel that we're at we don't think it would be a good idea to undertake a project at 230 North Street, and we do think the best option right now is to consider other sites.
Questions?
And thank you all. Sometimes the facts lead us in a direction that we didn't anticipate, but it seems to me prudent and obviously efficient in terms of our resources, not to be spending money on something that doesn't seem to make sense in many ways, in many levels. So I really appreciate that. So maybe it's a question for Ted. Ted, where are we if there's going to be a warrant article proposed timing-wise? I know the 20th is coming fast. I mean,
so this is, I think, the reason they're here tonight, and they proposed this article is for you guys, just like with the Town Administrative Bylaw Committee. Now is when you have to decide whether or not you want to put articles forth. You don't have to discuss the merits of them, but you at least have to decide to put them forth. And so they've come to you with an article that you could vote to include on the warrant for this year.
and it may be somewhat self-evident what it is, but maybe just a brief description so I make sure.
Sure, so essentially the warrant article would allow us to consider sites other than 230 North Street for a fire station to serve the north and west side of town. But in conjunction with that, and not to make this a much bigger discussion than we probably have time for, but as we look at a location that moves away from 230 North Street, and not to prejudice the discussion, but I think most people think that means moving towards Bear Cove Park, Fort Hill Street in that direction, because there really isn't a lot of other opportunities moving in the other way. Then that brings into question, well, what are we going to do in South Hingham? Because now we're starting to encroach into the area that would be served by either the current South Hingham station or, depending on what we do in the future, whether we relocate the current South Station or build a fourth station if that's what's decided is needed. The location of this station becomes critical to that discussion. So we didn't think it was appropriate for us to just look at a north station in a vacuum. That we need to also consider looking at what might make sense in the south side. Doesn't mean that we're looking for permission to go build a fire station somewhere other than at, I think it's 847 Main Street. It's just that we want to be able to think about, if we build a north station here, if everybody thinks that's a great site, what does that mean for the next step of the process? And I think everybody is aware, and we discussed this at town meeting last year, that this was always intended to be at least a two-stage process, that we start with North Street, and then when that was done, we would take a look at what we needed up in South Hingham.
So, when we cite facilities in government that we need, the fire stations are the unique facility in that we cite them based on geographic location so they can cover the area. They have the response times to each area. And I know Bob's done quite a bit of work with the Asset Review Committee and Tom in the past before this committee got going. And I think what really Greg is saying is that if you're shifting this station, you have to pay attention to the effect on its service calls to the other two stations. And so they could not go look at a second station, a second site for north, without understanding what it would impact central and south. And I think they're cognizant of that, and I think that's really forthright.
Well, it sounds like potentially the implication of this, I know that there's an issue with some parts of South Hingham that are below the standard response time. By looking at this in the aggregate, perhaps there's a possibility that if situated properly, 3 stations could cover all of Hingham.
I think what we're kind of experiencing is that 3 might be able to, but if you remember what the Asset Review Committee did talk about at one time when they looked at that 3 versus 4, it's also the size of the crews that you have in the stations. And I think what you're probably going to hear some conversation about the stations need to be a little bit bigger so that they can house more personnel so that you can respond. South is actually not in a spot where it can get to a lot of its calls, but it can't get to the second call. And we're getting a lot of those calls in that south end. And if you look at the town, we're starting to get stretched between the north side and the south side. So I was very pleased when the chief came to me, and then I did talk to Greg about what they were talking about. Remember last year a couple of years ago, we did an asset review committee to say, okay, before we build these stations, make sure they're in the right locations. And before we buy this equipment, let's make sure it's the right equipment for the sizes and the places we have. That's the planning function that we've done well here, and I think it's produced a good result. Maybe the downside is that we don't have a north station, but maybe the plus side is we can figure out a better way to do a 3-station model that works.
I'd like to add, as one who served and technically is probably still serving on the Assets Review Committee, which we never abolished. that the part of this proposed warrant article to consolidate within the existing building committee the responsibility for the total evaluation of the town's needs with respect to fire stations is a good one. Everybody actually who was on the Assets Review Committee in one form or another, except one person, is on this committee. And that person is willing to be a resource for the committee as well. The advantages of locating the rest of the search for right stations, right department development, right locations for the town in this one committee is that this committee has access to the experts that they're using, who are quite good. So the notion, I think we got ahead of ourselves when we said, okay, the north station will start and we can build it. Because the feasibility study had said that the location is suitable for serving the needs of north. And that had gotten, that train had left the station a lot earlier, before the planning process had proceeded to establish that if one postulated north where it is, south where it is, and you looked at the needs of South Hingham, the run numbers don't work, the time doesn't work, and you would really need to be looking at a fourth station. Once of course, this was all done with just a feasibility study, and the thing about a building committee, as Greg has amply demonstrated, is you start looking and all of a sudden you find all the problems. The soil is totally unsuitable. We would be crazy to build so that the first building that collapses when the earthquake comes is the one we're all relying on to come help us and dig us out. And the site restrictions don't permit a facility that would be worthwhile for 50 years, let alone a good one for today. So the further diligence demonstrates that's not the right place. That's now a blessing in disguise, because as one moves, now we're not locked into a pre-existing location. And we can ask ourselves, we have Central, we have two 75-year-old stations that are utterly inadequate. The problem has to be addressed. Is there a way to address the location that would permit us to serve the needs of the town, meet the time standards to get everywhere when you're supposed to, and be able to do it from 3 rather than 4 stations? The 4th station option, or the 4th station consideration, always had with it 2 inherent negatives. One is you're running a 4th building and you have all your operating costs of that, plus that 4th building is additional capital outlay. The other disadvantage it had is that you are guaranteeing that you're going to be running additional crews immediately, and you have a much higher personnel cost at the moment. As well as the fact that if you get spread that far, there are some real issues about how you would be managing the crews that were on duty and where they would be, and would have some locations probably with fewer firefighters in them than is good. So there were complications with it. In the end, as we told you when the deputy and I and the former chief were last here, giving the report about the problems in South Hingham and the need to address these run numbers. We're going to make these decisions based on being sure that the town of Hingham and everyone in the town of Hingham gets the quality of service in firefighting and health assistance that meets the sort of standards we demand nationally and locally. The fact that we're going to relook at the locations gives us a fresh opportunity to potentially, and initial looking at it suggests that this may well be a feasible opportunity. It gives us the opportunity of perhaps doing that with a 3-station model for the town going forward, rather than necessarily a fourth. Either way, we need to do that analysis and what's best for the town and come back. This is a wonderful committee that's been appointed. They're doing terrific work. I'm more than happy to turn over all of the records of the Asset Review Committee and continue it in a reinvigorated form within this committee. So I think that you've got the report basically from this group that that site isn't going to work. That's what we're going to tell the town. That's not the place to build it. Now that we've got to look, and we've got to look at all of the needs of the town, I think this is the right group to give that charge, and the warrant article would do it.
Chief, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think it's been said. I would just say it simpler, that we have an opportunity now to look at the whole instead of the part, and to do the right thing by the town by considering that whole and endorsing this article.
Succinctly stated. Thank you.
Can I just, a money question, is the appropriation from the 2015 annual town meeting, will there be any funds remaining?
Questions?
There's none left now. No, just kidding. Though we have spent money. I think we spent about $90,000 of the money, and that was to get to the schematic design that we have now, and include a lot of engineering work, geophysical work, etc. And money well spent, I think. And we are going to try and leverage some of the schematic work as much as we could into our future design, but obviously there'll be some limitations on that. So let's just, for round numbers' sake, say we have $410,000 left. We can do a lot with $410,000, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. And we did actually put some language in there about increasing the funding, but we didn't put in an amount. I think that's something that needs to be sort of studied between now and sort of when advisory would make their recommendation. I think by then we should have a better sense of whether we, can we do what we need to do with what we have left, or do we need some more money?
Yeah, and I think, because right now with warrant articles, typically we don't put the money until we get to the recommended motion, because it's just cleaner. We just might also want to check to see whether there's a warrant article that would be needed, Betty, to roll that money into this work. I don't know if it does, but I seem to remember 2 years ago with the school project.
I think what you would do is just write it into the article.
Okay.
To transfer the funds from article, into this article.
So we just want to make sure that that's in order so that you have access to that money. And I would just say as well that as this is going through the town meeting process, I would focus on the incremental ask, because I think people could very easily remember the amount from last year, look at this amount, and think that they're additive, when in fact they're not.
Of course.
Okay, I'm ready for a vote. How about you? You ready? I'll entertain a motion that we vote to move proposed Article A and B as it relates to the fire station building.
Just A.
Just A. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Stereo? Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Keep moving forward. Okay, at this time, I know there's a discussion contemplated with respect to the Hingham Maritime lease. I'm not going to participate in that because my daughter is employed as the executive director there, but just so we don't keep Mr. Fedoni and whoever else is here with him languishing in the back, I'm going to get up and have that meeting between the two of you take place. So you,
Is Rick's going to come up?
Sure.
Hello.
We do not have a lease agreement. We are still working towards it. The lease, the RFP requires the Board of Selectmen in conjunction with LMC to extend the period of time to allow them to negotiate the lease. If the board, and I have a motion in front of the board here to do so, if the board chooses to, we'll continue on. If the board doesn't, then we need to go back to the RFP process and start again.
Could we just have folks identify themselves?
Oh, sure.
Sure. Richard Pedoni, 12 Newtown Drive, and I'm president of the board of directors of the Maritime Center.
And I'm Nancy Kerber from 6 Blackberry Lane, and I'm on the board of Hingham Maritime.
So, Ted, the current extension was through the 18th. We agreed on probably a 3-month, or was it a 3-month extension?
60 days.
60 days, I believe, from November to January.
January 18th. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I think it's the 18th. I know that this is the last meeting you're having before that deadline.
Right. That's how we planned it. So I guess, and I'm not sure who, because I know I've talked to Rick, and I have a sense of it. I'm just trying to find out where we are, because I spoke to several people, and I get the sense that Lincoln, is it Lincoln Maritime or Hingham Maritime?
Hingham Maritime.
Hingham Maritime. I'll get that right eventually.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that, and Rick is back in the discussion, which is great, although Stuart did a good job for the time that he was with us, has made some type of proposal, and I'm going to ask a question because I think there was confusion when Ted and I were talking. Since the summer, has there been one proposal or 2 proposals from the Hingham Maritime?
I don't know. A draft lease was presented to us by the town, and then we commented on it, and shortly before Thanksgiving, we got it back through our council to the town. So I know that's where things stand. Whether there was one that went back and forth in there, I'm not sure.
Okay. That I'm aware of.
No, that's good. I mean, I only really officially was aware of one, but in discussions, Ted and I were talking, there may or may not have been some other, I guess it wasn't, but there was confusion. So my question is, and Ted, I think we've talked about it, is the next step would be the town would respond in some kind.
Correct.
Okay.
We have a document from Real Estate Counsel, Susan Murphy, that addresses some of the issues that was given to a proposal to us by the Maritime Center in November. Susan has some comments, and she's provided it to myself and to Mary to review, and we need to get the time to sit down and review that so we can meet with our council, understand the implications of the issues that are raised, and there are some substantial issues. They're surmountable, but they're substantial. And then we need to sit back down with Lincoln Maritime. The Hingham
Maritime Center.
Hingham Maritime Center. Okay, just take me a few times to get that. I get it.
So when did Susan give the comments to you or Mary?
I don't have the exact date, but I believe it was...
I got November 30th.
Okay.
November 30th. It was the Monday right after Thanksgiving.
That's when you got their proposal?
Yes, so we, yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's when we received, that's when we received feedback from the Hingham Maritime Center on the lease that the town had previously advanced for consideration. I think we have one of these things where the very difficult time for the Hingham Maritime Center to invest the time and effort is when they're in the throes of all the wonderful activities they provide down at the water. We have the opposite effect, which is the day after Thanksgiving, which happened to be 5 days after we got the Aquarian ruling, and as you've seen from being very patient and sitting through this meeting, this is the equivalent of our sort of busy time. So our schedules haven't jived up, but I don't think that in any way reflects the commitment that we all have to seeing this lease through to fruition. And I think while Ted has said there are some things that we have to work through, I'm committed and confident that will get there. And I understand that there are components to it. There's ensuring that the Hingham Maritime Center can continue to fulfill its mission. It's ensuring that our Hingham High School rowing and sailing can continue to pursue their work, which was all spelled out in the RFP, and ensuring that from the town's perspective, as we're entering into a 30-year lease, which, you know, is a pretty long time, that the town feels comfortable living with the terms of that lease. So I know that this is taking longer than we thought, but I'm encouraged by our shared commitment and conviction to keep working through.
And I think I've said this before, Mayor, I am very happy that you and I are committed to this, because I think it's very worthwhile and serves the town's best interests in many, many ways. So, and I understand that we were at a time where things were a little busy, and it was right around Thanksgiving. So that's not my issue. I didn't even know that we received anything until a couple of days before Christmas, when I made a phone call and made an inquiry. But so that, I would hope that would change, because I'm interested. Even though I'm not participating, I just want to know. And then the impression I was given, not by you, obviously, we haven't spoken on this, but was the impression I was given that we weren't going to deal with this until the spring. And I thought that was contrary to what I was thinking commitment-wise, that we, you know, since we had it, and the only thing I'm asking, I guess, is trying to get a timeline realistic, because I know we're busy, but I know we're looking at other things too, and we just have to prioritize. I understand all that, and I'm offered my assistance to the extent I can. So I guess I just want to kind of get a signal, maybe from Ted and yourself, but I was under the impression that our response would be after you two had met and spoke with legal counsel for us, and I just was trying to get an idea when that was going to happen.
And I would also point out that, you know, 60 days ago when we were talking, I think we acknowledged that when we came back together tonight, that we would not, you know, this would not have come to conclusion. I think I had originally proposed something around the end of March, just given not only the work we have to do, but something that's important to both Paul and I, which is that when we have a lease, that it be available for 2 weeks for members of the public to see it and comment on it. So, you know, I agree with you, and I think one of the things that I found kind of coming into this role, and I thought I had an appreciation for it before I became part of this team, but I kind of didn't, is the number of demands and pressures on this group and on the Selectmen's office. And I was actually jotting down some of the things we've done since November 30th. We've been dealing with the Aquarian matter. We're dealing with some real estate transactions, which we're actually going into executive session on. We have been trying to work because Avalon has filed a 250-unit, they've pulled a permit for a 250-unit complex down at the shipyard. We've been dealing with some sewer issues, a $100 million budget, the fire stations, as we've just heard, and a lot of personnel issues that stem from both some unusual circumstances as well as the fact that we have some new people in leadership roles. So I bring that up to say that we're dealing with many important things, and this is also an important thing. I think right now, over the next few weeks, our focus, as you've seen tonight, has got to be on January 20th, because if things don't go, they miss a year. When this came in at the end of November, Ted and I had a kind of a brief conversation, and I think you mentioned to me at that time that, you know, we might not be looking at being able to invest some substantial time in this until the spring. I know you and I
think the words I used was it was completely unrealistic to think you could do this lease by the end of February, or quite honestly, even the end of March.
Yep.
I've been through this process that you're going through for 20 years. I know what you're up against. I know it's 10 o'clock, 10:15, and you haven't gotten to your rest of your agenda. And I know what your next meeting and your next meeting and your next meeting are going to be like, because I've done it over and over again. And this lease particularly, and the reason I told you that the last time, this lease particularly is going to take conversation, because the issues are not necessarily financial where we could negotiate a particular point. They're structural issues about who does what and how certain activities occur. And it is going to take time with the parties involved. I listened to the last round and we talked, and I heard what was being said in there to me, and I made a judgment that this was not going to, it was an hour meeting, and we accomplished a bit, but the issues are weighty, and I was just talking about it with the other side. I haven't even discussed it with the three of you yet, and I've got to go through that in the executive session. And so it's going to take time if you want it to be done right and to be done well. And I think both sides do want it to be done right and to be done well.
So what I might propose, and given the hour at hand, is that Ted, could we commit to myself as the liaison, you and Susan, sitting down to review the document we received from the Hingham Maritime Center in the month of February?
You know, if it's the board's pleasure, we certainly could do that. I'll be able to do that.
Yeah, and I realize that as we're saying yes to some things, we're shifting others. And I wouldn't want to, coming out of that meeting, our council is going to need to make modifications to the lease. I'm a little hard-pressed right now to make a commitment on how long that might take, because I wouldn't want to put that sort of pressure on council.
And I would want that to be reiterated, because certainly we could have a meeting in February, we can keep this going, except we're going to wind up stopping again, because later in February, you're going to have to try to balance the budget, you're going to have to close the warrant articles, you're going to have to discuss the warrant articles, you're going to have meetings with representatives of the community. Last year, you had an article down on a property on the south end of Hingham that you didn't expect was going to be a big issue that turned into a multi-meeting issue.
Sure.
These things are going to happen. I don't know which ones they're going to happen, but they happen every single year.
And council,
you're going to want that conversation.
Sure. And council, in some ways, can get drawn into some of those as well.
Correct.
And so, I think the question is I think we're both in favor of putting a lease extension. And I think the question, Paul, is we have a motion in front of us, and I think the question is a date. And I know that the last time we talked about this, I had suggested at that point about 4 months out, and I know it was important to you to do something shorter so that we could have this conversation again. If that's a path that you would like to take, I'm happy to advance a motion where we could come back in another 60 days to see where we are, to see what progress has been made. I'd be willing to do that if that helps, if that's your preference.
Here's my problem. I'm very happy with your commitment with this. So this isn't directed to you at all. Very happy with it, and Lincoln has made a proposal. My only concern is that I've had 2 conversations with my town administrator. The last one we had was a very good one. The first one was not a very good one, where I felt like my voice was not being heard. And even though I thought you and I spoke very strongly that what we wanted to have accomplished, I felt like my voice wasn't being heard. And so we had a very good conversation the other day. And I think we cleared up maybe a couple of misunderstandings, maybe, if that's what you want to call them. And I felt very good about that. So my problem is, I don't know what's going to happen next. In other words, in the time frame. So I want to keep a tight leash on this thing. I want to know that, and I take you at your word. I know you'll do it. Is that you're going to meet with Susan, and that's what I thought was going to happen. And I would like to see that happen in early February and come back, and so I know, or Ted can give me an update as to what's happening. There's no downside of us keeping it on a tight leash, because I want to know what's happening. I did not know about the proposal for a month. And when I asked, I was initially told there was no proposal. So I know that was corrected, and it was a mistake, but the point is that these are things that I should have known beforehand. I'm not sure what's going to happen next week or 3 weeks. The uncertainty of it all, it gives me pause, and nothing to do with you.
I will also tell you that we haven't had any conversations about the document we received on November 30th, other than to say we received it. And the town administrator staff gave that to me as the liaison, but there hasn't been any conversation about it at all. So So what would you propose?
Can I just, before you get into the
Sure.
proposals, can I just give you one other issue that's come up in the conversations that I had with Rick? The Hingham
Maritime Center.
Hingham Maritime Center.
We're going to get you a T-shirt.
I love T-shirts. Its lease expires on December 31st, 2016, at the end of this summer. One of the things that was beneficial about the previous lease was that it always extended 1 year past, and so that allowed them to do the appropriate planning. It's impossible to plan a summer activity if you don't know if you're going to have access until January 1st. So I think we could get this lease done within the next several months, or maybe a few more than that, but certainly within that period of time. But I don't want them to feel that when you're in a negotiation, one of the worst things you can have is the pressure of time, making people feel like if they don't get it done in time, they're going to lose. I'm not pressured about you. You guys want to have me back here every week to give you an update. I'm okay with that. I don't have an issue with that. But I don't want the person I'm negotiating with feeling like if I don't move quick enough, it's possibly that we could just time them out and they're off the dock. That's not the issue. The problem we have is we cannot extend them a lease under law past the 16th because we'd have to go through an RFP process to do that, and that's what we're doing. The board can extend them an operating a license for a 1 year period at your discretion at any point in time. And at some point in time, I think I'd like the board to entertain that conversation to at least remove that issue that people might feel that that the lease is dragging on in a way to avoid or time them out of being on that dock, and it's absolutely not the case. It's a matter of time and a matter of conversations.
Yep. And I would hope that if that provides a sense of commitment and it just sort of takes one worry off the table, that would, that would be, those would be good reasons to do it.
And to answer your time about February, Mary, actually, I did speak to Paul yesterday, as he mentioned. The first week of February is the week that we would want to try to do this because the back end of February is going to be torturous in terms of time schedules with the school vacation and with closing out of the budget cycle.
So the step would be, so Paul, I think the step would be that if we sat, and I would also point out in this that as the Selectmen liaison, I think the primary review and discussion of the lease needs to take place between our town administrator and council who have collective expertise in this area. I think my role is more understanding the policy implications and so coming out of that meeting, I would see Susan having some work to do to reflect any of our discussion into a document. It's a little bit open-ended to me right now of what that might take from her. So I'm not sure what that does in terms of a specific extension date and how to handle that. I would also, knowing that this is the time when we are meeting and meeting late into the evening, I want to make sure that we have updates, that the public is aware of what's going on. I also don't want to fall in the trap of having the same conversation super frequently at the expense of other business. So I'm happy to support a 60-day extension, knowing that we would come back and sort of see where we are. I would also suggest that perhaps we can use the town administrator reports to report out sort of the milestones that have taken place. I just, without knowing how long it will take our council to prepare something for Hingham Maritime to look at, I'm a little stuck with that. So what do you think?
Well, first of all, I talked to Rick, and I assured him when I spoke to him and that there's no pressure being applied or intended to be applied to Hingham Maritime Center. What I'm really just trying to do is the commitment I made to the people in the town, the people involved with sailing and rowing, and people who use the water, that this would be a high priority for me. And I did not get the feeling back in December when I had a conversation that it was a priority that was being listened to, honestly. So when we came forward, I was told that we could talk about it at the meeting, which I knew we could. And, I assumed that your commitment was unwavering as it is and as it was before. And so I was a little perplexed as to why I wasn't getting a good feeling from the town administrator about that. But having said that, it has nothing to do with the Hingham Maritime Center, and so there shouldn't be any suggestion or even thought that we're trying to pressure them, that they're going to be pressured. I think they want to get it done as quickly as we do at this point. The ball is starting to roll. What I wanted to hear, and I'm beginning to hear, is that we have at least a tentative time period where you three are going to meet, you and Ted and Susan. And I spoke to Susan, and Susan is ready to do that. I don't know if you guys are ready to do that, but you may have to meet first, or whatever that works out. If it's early February, the three of you meet, I understand that the deadlines are not going to be, and times are not going to be set. I am willing to do a 30-day extension so that I can feel comfortable that what we talk about tonight and what I talked about with Ted the other day is what's going to happen. And if we come back, I can talk to Ted in the meantime and find out where we are. We did it the other day. It's not going to take a lot of time and effort away from our other tasks. I just think we need to make it a priority, and I'd like to be updated. That's really where I am.
Would you entertain 60 days?
I will not.
Oh.
No, I'm sorry. It's not you. I just want to be comfortable.
And I'm going to, I kind of feel like our selectmen staff is being thrown under the bus here a little inappropriately. We have a huge volume of work at a really, really busy time. And, if I'm not in here on a daily basis, I'm talking to the office on a daily basis, and I really do have an appreciation for the time-intensive nature, particularly of some of the personnel matters that we've been facing. We have a number of citizens who have been looking for assistance with warrant articles. We have kind of the day-to-day stuff that comes up, and I think, when it comes to priorities, we need to understand that for everything that we're taking on and doing, something else is slipping a little. And right now, to be honest, in the next 90 days, my focus and priority are on things that relate to town meeting. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't room to do other things, but I think it means that at this time, we probably can't move as fast on this lease as we could have if we had taken it up in the summer. And that's just kind of the nature of things. It doesn't make sense to me to do a 30-day extension, but if that's all you're willing to do, I'll go along with it, because I think the alternative is that the RFP expires, and I don't think any of us want that.
So, and I appreciate that. And but I will tell you this, that my comments have nothing to do with the staff, selectmen staff. It has to do with conversations I've had that gave me some concern about whether we were treating this as a priority. And we may disagree on what our priorities are, and that's fair, that's okay. I mean, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that, but so let's do the 30 days, and I'm hearing good things, and the more good things I hear, the more flexible I think I would be prepared to be.
Okay.
But I just want to have a consistent message that we are, and it has nothing to do with staff at all, so I just want to be clear on that.
So I'm going to make a motion. I'm just looking at my calendar here.
That's what I was doing, the same thing.
I'm looking
I want to make sure it falls on a Thursday.
Well, the 18th is school vacation week, Betty, and so I don't know that we're meeting.
I don't know the board's availability.
I don't know if the board has scheduled a meeting for February 18th.
Generally, we don't schedule a meeting the week of school vacation.
So would you be...
Do we have a schedule at all for those
So
periods?
if you could extend it to the...
I think you'll be meeting every other week other than...
The week of the 25th?
Thursday, February 20... I mean, if we... Paul, what I would suggest is that...
The 11th to the 25th, I would tell you.
I'll take the 11th.
How about the 12th? So you have your meeting the 11th, 12th Friday. Is that okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
It really, I mean, I don't think a couple weeks in that matter. Mr. Gannon would like to see a commitment that we're going to meet that first week of February. We'll get that done, and we'll discuss the progress with you. I'm also going to schedule an executive session so I can go inside and I can start talking to you about these issues, because I think that's part of the problem, is that, some of them are a little weighty. We can accomplish them all, but there's some policy issues here that you've got to get through, and it's going to take you some time. I need to show you that, so I'll do that on the first week of February.
Thank you, Ted, I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Okay. I don't care to do things like this, but I feel like I have no choice. I will make a motion to extend the date for finalizing the lease on Barnes Wharf until Friday, February 12th, 2016.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks for coming in. Thanks for bearing with the meeting tonight.
We appreciate both of your support a lot, and we're looking forward to getting it done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Fund balance?
Sure. We're on a roll.
Fix the lights.
All right, now let's get into the interesting stuff.
If you turn out the lights, I don't know what's going to happen here.
It's all good. It's all good. Me? I appreciate that.
So, what you have here is a bar graph that shows you where you stand with your fund balance. Your total fund balance as of the end of 2015 was $31.4 million. So, for the folks at home, fund balance is a governmental's version of retained earnings, accumulations over the years, and it's what we refer to as available reserves. About 8 years ago, the GASB produced a statement that required us to differentiate fund balance. It went into effect for us several years ago, and you see in the bar graph a green, a blue. I hope you can see it at home. A green, a blue, a yellow, and a red bar. In the right side of the graph, you'll see a box with identifications of what those are. Restricted, representing 1.25 million, committed, representing 6.5 million, assigned, representing 2.36, and unassigned, representing 22.1. I'm not going to go into the details of what each of those individual categories are. But to suggest that the difference between unassigned, which as it sounds is completely unassigned, and several different versions of restrictions that earmark that money for different purposes. And so what the credit rating agencies look at, and why we use a comparison of our total annual expenditures, abbreviated as TAE, to what we have in reserves, they've decided that they're going to look at unassigned as opposed to previously they looked at everything. And so, Betty, if you can flip the page here, what you see is that the unassigned portion is 21.2 million of 21.2 million, which represents 23.3% of total annual expenditures, and our financial policy refers to 16 to 20% within fund balance being maintained. So, and just a brief moment about what 16 to 20% means. What it means is that when you get below 16%, you need to stop spending. Because the credit rating agencies have said you've created your policy and you want to maintain. So that lower limit is a hard limit. Obviously, you're allowed to by law, and then you have to deal with the consequences. As you move through that from 16 to 20, you have discretion. If you're at 17, you could spend money if you wanted to, or 18, 19, or 20. The town has chosen not to. But once you're past 20%, I think it's important for you to have a discussion about what you're going to do with those excess funds. And I think this is the kickoff of it, and I think what I would recommend to you is that you have this conversation really didn't have to have this conversation for the last few years because we were trying to get there, but you're there now, and you're likely to be there on a regular basis, hopefully, if we keep running the places as well as we have. And so I think you need to have a conversation about what to do with essentially what is excess tax dollars. Okay.
Where do we begin? It's 25 of 11. We still have the executive session. Paul, anything you want to add?
Can you advance it too?
So Ted, when, if, sorry, I know we talked, but I just want to make sure I understand. When we, is there a time limit on when we can kind of make this decision between now and town meeting? I mean, is there?
So, yeah, you'll have to make it between now and probably the warrant publishing book, possibly if you could use a supplement legally, but I think prudent financial management would suggest that as you're going through the budgets now, you're going to have to make some decisions about some funding initiatives. I know capital outlay is going to be looking for more than they have available in their budget. The demands from departments are a lot. You have a lot of building projects out there. You were just given a multi-million-dollar road building plan. You could fund it through bonds. I'm going to recommend to you that you fund it through fund balance because you have quite a bit of debt out there, and you have some other projects that you're going to have to borrow for. So you have some ideas that you're going to have to start thinking about, and I'll give you some suggestions, but ultimately these are policy decisions for you guys to make.
Thank you.
We're talking about an amount of approximately $3 million, a little over that. And you can see that depicted in this graph right here. So it's not an unsubstantial sum of money that you're going to have this year.
So we could be using some of this money for the fire station study effort?
You could. You could. I mean, we have to see what their budget is. I think they had $410,000 left. We need to see how much of that they're going to be able to expend effectively within that next fiscal year. But I think you've got, like I said, you've got the roads, you've got capital, and you have other projects. In addition to the fire stations, you've got a potential senior center you're looking at. You've got building projects in the school department. So you've got a lot of activity.
Well, would we have to be making any decisions until those numbers are clarified or crystallized? Or?
I think you're going to be making them as they come out through the budget process. As you look at the demands of the budget, as we begin to balance it, as you know, you're still $500,000 in deficit. We'll see the library project repairs, which is one of the largest capital projects we'll have this year. It's going to challenge the committee to meet their constraints. The library is usually a department that doesn't take up what's going to be a third of their available funding, and so I think we're going to recognize that there might need to be some additional resources. In the past, we've sometimes borrowed for those resources. I think you're in a good situation now where you potentially don't have to do some of those borrowings. You potentially could just leave it in fund balance and move it from unassigned to restricted by saying you want to save it for a project that you have. So I think all of those
that will be in the pipeline.
Correct. Correct. And you know what a lot of those projects
are.
And
would we be prioritizing that?
If you're going to spend this money at town meeting, you need to put a warrant article forth. And so or allocate it to an existing operating budget, capital budget. And so you'll be making these decisions and having this conversation. I expect people will be asking you to allocate this money for the projects that they're looking for.
Going to be lined up.
Wow. So
from unassigned to restricted, what does that require? And maybe just you could give a hypothetical.
Well, there are the three categories: restricted, committed, and unassigned, have different legal criteria. Some of them can be done by the Board of Selectmen. Some of it's more of a Governmental Accounting Standards Board's designation for telling the world, what that total fund balance means. So, really, I think from your purposes, if you the restricted represents items that are committed to certain activities. The committed represents, I believe, those are the stabilization funds. And so you'd be taking votes at town meeting to move them forward, or you'd be taking management actions, and then we classify it accordingly. So if I know, for example, that mooring permits, the Board of Selectmen voted when they adopted mooring permits to restrict them for water-related activities. So we manually restrict them, and we leave them in the restricted fund. It's not a legal restriction. You could spend it anytime you want, but you guys have, so management, your management, have said that, and over the years, that's how we classify our financial statements, and we review that with the auditors to make sure they agree with those designations.
That's part of the operating budget, right? I'm talking about, you mentioned, I thought, you said we could take some unassigned and restrict it or transfer it to.
Well, that's essentially what you would do if you were to say that you, let's say you wanted to take all $3 million and allocate it for the fire station building committee. It would immediately go from assigned to
unassigned.
Well, technically it would go to restricted, and then eventually it would go to, unassigned, then eventually it would go to assigned.
Okay.
So it moves through steps, because you legally can't bind the town, but your management, so the financial statements need to reflect management's view. And so, and then when it moves from town meeting votes it, then it would go from restricted to, now technically, that's a little bit of theory, but we only do those transactions at the end of the year, so we would move it right into unassigned.
So it's important to note that our town financial policy, and actually the advisory committee modified the policy last year, anticipating this was going to come, to say what do you do when you have the luxury of being able to have the conversation of having excess in your rainy day fund. And one thing that has always been in place on the advisory committee financial policy is that fund balance is not used to fund ongoing operating expenses. So we're not going to use that for police officers and things like that. When the advisory committee modified its financial policy last year, it said, that the advisory committee should participate in discussions where we might be looking to tap into unassigned fund balance, and that things that should be considered are things like debt reduction, long-term liabilities, capital, major projects. So again, just kind of keeping it out of morphing it into the operating budget.
Right, that's right, good.
And so, Paul, you and I, remember we talked about this yesterday. So the example there, very easy so folks at home understand that, is, this money is the result of operations that occurred during fiscal 2015. This is the surplus that was generated. There's no guarantee that result of operations is going to occur next year. We had good budget surpluses, we had good revenue surpluses. That's not a guarantee every year, just like any business. And so you wouldn't want to take that money and assign it to something that was going to repeat every year, for example, like teacher salaries, police salaries, or fire salaries, because if it didn't come back next year, then you'd have to lay those people off.
So
what if you have a bad year and you've spent down to that 18 figure and you go below that? I mean,
okay, so
some in there.
18 is the top of the range.
So 18 is the top at the 16. So remember what I said, 18 would represent 20%. And the financial policy is 16 to 20%. So to answer your question, if you penetrated below the 20%, I don't think that in itself would be a cause for concern. If you continue to trend where you went 20, 18, 16, I think that would be a cause of a concern, but that would be something you'd see over a period of time. And we saw that happening in the beginning of this century, where we went from in the upper 20s and we went steadily. If you pull out the financial statements, you'll see we dropped 2 to 3% every year, allocating this money to large capital projects until we got down to the bottom of 8.9%. And so you want to be cautious about going below 20, and then certainly I would recommend to you that the 16 is a hard stop. And that's what we committed to the rating agencies when we talked to them about the negative outlook, that we had these financial policies, and at least I portrayed the comments I heard from advisory and finance and the selectmen at the time, that the lower number was going to be a hard stop. We weren't going to be spending any money, and in fact we didn't. So we actually did exactly what we said we would do. If you looked at the financial statements and the budgets for 2009, 10, 11, 12, and 13, we didn't spend money out of fund balance.
You know, so the potential here, if it's $3 million, I think we ought to recognize that this would be the first time in a really long time, and since 2008, that we'd be drawing from fund balance. So whatever the conversation's going to be, it's going to get a lot of visibility. And I guess the other thing I'm looking at is, while the potential there is $3 million, I don't know that I want to be on the Board of Selectmen that's recommending that we spend all $3 million of it in 1 year. You know, if some of it gets restricted or assigned for a future project and it gets moved into another category, I'd feel comfortable, but I just...
In lieu of borrowing.
I just, yeah, but, you know, spending the whole thing in 1 year doesn't kind of feel right with me. You know, I know Roger gave us a great presentation on the roads tonight. The benefit of the roads is that everybody uses the roads, so everybody benefits. His 5-year plan is $2.2 million. It feels like a lot to me, you know, to allocate $2.2 million of that. Maybe we do. I was asking him kind of about, well, you know, maybe 2 years. I don't know. I guess my initial reaction is this is a great conversation to have, and let's not spend it all this year.
In one place.
So,
yeah.
And maybe, and Ted and I were talking, and I thought, wasn't there some discussion about maybe doing it over a period of time? Because my question was, Mary, was how much, you know, we could give him money this year. How much could he actually get done in 1 year?
And that's what you saw in his report. If you see, and that's, I think, why we asked that question. I know I had made sure Roger was ready to address that, is that, you know, he needs that money in a minimum in a 2-year increment, because he's planning later this year, next year's road work. And you don't want him to go through the planning effort literally to create layouts, designs, and then find out he doesn't have the money. So I think that would be appropriate, but you can structure it so you don't have to do the whole $2.2 million. You could do 2 years at a time.
And so when you do a warrant article and you fund it out of fund balance, so what happens is the whole amount goes into that assigned, right, Ted?
Correct.
So what'll happen is that bar with the slashes in it, that gets a little smaller, and the one above it gets bigger.
Until we spend
So in
it.
some ways, the fund balance is sort of still intact
Until we spend it.
until we spend it, but,
Portion of it's dedicated.
right. But there's part of me that still committing that whole $3 million to stuff in 1 year.
And no one,
Feels-
Well,
I don't think you're going to be presented, well, I'm sure, actually, I should say that. You will be presented with more than those requests, but you won't be getting a recommendation from me to do that. I would almost guarantee that. But, and this is the conversation you should have. How much of that and what is? And I think not so much how much, but what? And what are the nature of the projects you want to do? Because ultimately, I think that's what you have to justify to the public, you know, what are the nature of the expenditures? I have to say, I think roads are pretty compelling. I've heard about roads nonstop. We've had 2 of the worst winters that we've had in decades. It helped us backslide a little bit because of just the destructive nature of the last few winters. And as you said earlier, the success of the program, you know, people are driving down their road, they see a beautiful paved road, and then they go to their home, and and they're like, why is that not my road? And so, you know, we have an opportunity to get to this, and I think it would be extremely well received by the public to have a better road system.
And maybe on that point is, I want people at home to understand that this is, the range that we're looking for rating purposes, I guess, is from 16 to 20%.
Correct.
And we're only talking about money that's exceeded this, and this may be the first time, but it's not like we're going below that threshold of 20%. So we're not looking to go, I want to make sure people understand that we're not looking to go below that. But having said that, I'm not trying to say that we're going to spend all $3 million of it. I think we're going to need to be careful in talking about it, but I am very much interested in doing something with the roads because, you know, people have been waiting a while for these roads, as we heard from some of the folks in Whitcomb and other places. And if we have some money, we should allocate some money. I have no problem if we maybe, put it over a 2-year period, if that's what Roger wants. And whatever the number is open to discussion. But I just want to take a good look at it and make sure that we, people pay this money and it comes in from different expenses and taxes and so forth. I just want to make sure that people are happy enough with what we're doing.
And there are a lot of big, very worthy infrastructure projects across the town. To the extent that some of these dollars help to fund those, it's debt avoidance. And, that's another good thing, because remember that if you look at our debt policy, we still got a couple of years to go before we're back in conformance with the financial policy. So being able to apply some of these funds to perhaps reduce the amount of borrowing for something,
and if their debt
is also attractive.
It's debt within the levy, then that also frees up operating budget, which, as you know, you're constrained this year on your operating budget. So that's another benefit of that.
Yeah, and Ted, I know one of the things that we've also talked about are things like accelerated debt payments and/or additional payments towards long-term liabilities.
Well, one of the most effective ways but it's just not exactly salacious, is you pay your pension liability down. Why would you do that? Well, because your pension system's earning 8% over time, and you earn about 0.5% on your money that you're keeping in your bank. So your fund balance is earning 50 basis points, like it does at a savings account, and that's because of state law. And your retirement system is earning, for the last 20 years, it's earned about 10%. So it's a great approach, but it's a 20-year approach, and it doesn't really provide that touch benefit of local. And so I recommend it periodically to folks, and no one ever accepts it because it's usually
and our debt with all the refinancing that we've done with our debt is pretty low,
and our pension system is in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
So I would extend that to you. Of course, you have the OPEB liability, you could do that too, but again, OPEB liabilities and pension liabilities rarely stack up to roads and roofs. The finance people of our side understand that pretty well.
I agree with that.
So.
All right, well, thank you. Something to ruminate and reflect upon as we go forward into the spring, through the winter. I guess the final matter, we've taken 2 votes.
Oops. We have one more.
Voted for planning board appointment. 2 of you have extended the lease somewhat, finalizing it. The last item on the agenda is to recommend a transfer from the reserve fund to the Selectmen salaries account in the amount of $51,885.69.
This transfer is a 2-part transfer. It is it provides us the ability to start the assistant town administrator on March 1st. That will allow us to have an overlap with our existing assistant town administrator. The months of March and April are probably 2 of the busiest months for the assistant town administrator, and a tremendous amount of work between that position and the advisory committee, getting ready for town meeting. To not let a new person see that process and have to see it a year later would likely be more challenging to the outcome of the product that we have. I discussed this with the chairman of the advisory committee to get a sense as to what he thought about it, and he was extremely positive. The interview committees that I used to help me with this thought it was beneficial too. The other part of the transfer is the good news and the bad news. It's the buyout for the retiring assistant town administrator, and this is just a requirement of law. If we don't pay it, she's still going, so don't try that. So. All right, this is just what we got to do. This is, the end of a career.
A good one it has been.
So what is that tip? Because I know we talked the other day, and I don't remember that part of the conversation if we had, but so, and I'm not necessarily questioning, it's required by law.
It's sick, vacation, accrued benefits. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's all the things that happen over the career. It's mostly, I think, accrued vacation and things like that. The sick buy leaves that we have are very minimal.
It is really bittersweet to look at this transfer, Betty. I have to say, I mean, I was personally so delighted when you agreed to defer your retirement a year, and this town is so grateful for all the service, not just what you do, but the way you do it is, it's just such a good example to everybody. And I think everybody that has the opportunity to work with you is just better for it. And what is exciting to me is that I've come to know over the years that you have a great deal of institutional knowledge that isn't kind of written. Too long? It kind of isn't. It isn't written down anywhere. And when I think of how challenging it's going to be to fill your shoes, the idea of a transition where, the policies, the procedures, they may kind of be the same, but there are so many unique aspects, and for somebody to be able to do that, I think is one way that we can kind of keep a little piece of you as as you move on to things. So, but most of all, thank you seems like not enough words, but we are so grateful. So thank you.
So just on that, and I probably said it before, but and I feel like it's too early to be saying too much, so I'm not going to say too much. But you have been a godsend to me in terms of being able to understand the process and represent the people in town by getting the information I need. So I appreciate that very, very much. You don't know how much I appreciate that. And obviously that $15,000 is a non-issue, right, Ted? I mean, it's obviously something we did it this month or next month. It doesn't really matter. It's going to have to happen. So yeah. So the other part of the equation is the $36,346.15 to have a second assistant town administrator for 4 months. And I don't see the wisdom in that. Based on the budget we have, I know it's reserve fund transfer, and the sacrifices that we're asking people to make, I don't see that we need to bring in a person for 4 months. I understand that we may have busy time periods, but whoever that person may be may well have some knowledge of the process. He or she may not. But I don't want to say too much, but I just cannot agree to pay $36,000 for a person who, in many ways, we have the best. We have somebody here who is working till the end of June, and maybe some lesser amount that over the tail end of it, so there could be some overlap. I could be okay with, but I know we just talked about the other day, and my colleagues want to vote on it. I would probably have to vote no at this point, but I would accept.
As we talked about, Paul, the dilemma I have, and I understand 4 months is a little long for lead time. I need the first 2 months, March and April. And you can't say to somebody, come for the first 2 months and then leave for the second 2 months. So that's what we're in. And it's just the circumstance that we're in.
$36,000, it seems like a lot of money to be, and I'm sure other places do this and have transitions that are much shorter than 4 months, and we could use that money somewhere else. That's the way I look at it.
My comment is this. You make a very difficult job look easy. And I think the kind of instruction, experience, guidance that you, working with Ted, can impart to this new individual during the time when I think it could best be described as a crucible. we need that. We need that tutorial. I'm sure that whoever succeeds to the position that you're in will hopefully work out. But I think one of the ways to ensure that happens is to have the guidance that you can provide and the experience you can impart to some degree, obviously not all of it. You can't do a lifetime of service in 2 months. But I appreciate the dilemma that, Ted finds himself in. And, this is a big operation running this town. And, if you're okay with 2 months, but you're not with 4, I mean, we're arguing about 2 months of time. We get a person that, goes through the experience, is guided in the pitfalls of what to avoid prospectively. We're going to get a better work product. We're going to get somebody that comes out of the gate with a smoother transition. I've been through different transitions in various roles here in town, and there's always some adjustment. But up here, you want it to be as smooth and as hassle-free and trouble-free as possible. I mean, we're really not,
I know, but...
You want it smooth, right?
Just, I said I'd consider. I didn't say I was okay with 2 months. I just wanted to be clear. I don't want to be misquoted.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're okay with 2, but not with 4.
No, not really, but I'm willing to consider. I
don't want to hamstring the new guy coming in, or whoever it is, and the town administrator doing his job in a difficult climate, so.
I respect your opinion, by the way.
You need this vote tonight?
Thank you. I do.
And whatever your vote is, that's fine. I just don't think we need to do this, but again, whatever you guys want to do.
Well, why don't you give me a motion?
Yep, and I just asked Ted that this needs to get voted tonight in order to continue the process. I'll make a motion to transfer the sum of $51,885.69 from the reserve fund to the Selectmen's salary account.
No second. I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right. That was a nice... Let's see, we're on our 4th hour here now. At this point in time, the board will enter into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property because discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect of the negotiating position of the town. The board will not return to open session, and we'll do the roll call vote. We're going to dispense with Selectmen administrator reports tonight.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Night, everyone.
Good night.